We're doing Aussie bits in the chat, so they've had to sit through my horrible Aussie accent. Can you give them an actual good one?
Okay, we were talking about touchstones for accents. So
I know yours for this.
You do, yeah. So it's, I like that hat, mate. That's how I get into my Aussie accent.
I was actually thinking you were going to go with, yeah.
Oh, no, that's the other thing.
No.
Yeah? No. Yeah. No, it's, I like that hat, mate. Yeah, that's...
So
all the different vowels.
The question is, Aussie Dan, why did you have to go and resorb Matt? I was just getting used to him being here.
He had to stay in spirit, if not in physicality.
There's something very JRPG about butting off of someone only then to reabsorb them afterwards.
Yes, I'm the next step. I had to absorb the father.
It's true, more like Revolved, because we had a green screen, but here's the thing they don't tell you about green screens. When you're trying to manage 3 people with the optical distance from monitor to in front of a desk with a green screen, you really need more of like a green wall to your house to be able to manage that effectively. So
it didn't look as nice as this.
Thankfully, the webcam had a wide enough lens, but now we're revolving into something a little more manageable and hopefully technically tasteful. I'm Aaron Sudoku. Whom do we have here? Is it Dan? Is it Matt?
That's me. It's Dan with Matt's Sens de Rouvre.
Dan McGill Hughes de Rouvre. There we go. You can only hear us from one ear.
Mike's in the shot.
Is it in the shot? Can you move it up?
Yeah.
All right. We seem to be good there. I don't see the mic. But only coming out of one ear. Pottery, do you have that too? So the thing I should say before we get too far into things is that the wonderful, immutable Dan Hughes was so generous as to give me a new mic to upgrade the stream, which was overdue and should be awesome. But yeah, we may encounter some technical difficulties as we're working to that. So appreciate folks' understanding in advance.
Monitor off, that's good.
It seems to be. Do you need to switch it between like mono and
that
stereo
may be
or something?
Start talking. Let's see if we can get some feedback.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll tag the intro while Dan is working on this, and feel free to give us live feedback while we try to troubleshoot this. If you're just tuning in, this is the technical prelude to With a Terrible Fate stream, and specifically my Tales of Praxis series. So if you're just tuning in, withtheterriblefate.com is your first and final source for all literary studies of video games. We do that in all sorts of content, from long-form written to lectures to podcasts to streams that evolve along with our audience. And Tales of Praxis is a series I've been running for the better part of a year at this point, looking at, analyzing, and celebrating just the storytelling of Bandai Namco's amazing Tales JRPGs, between publishing on them and replaying them and revisiting them with all of you, and bullying my buddy Dan Hughes into playing some of them. It's an all-service adventure in which we've been trying to understand the themes with which these games are concerned, the storytelling language with which they engage those themes, and how we can engage with the series as a whole in a way that is greater than the sum of its parts, which we've been doing since, I think, March, through streams, where we are now visiting Tales of Grace's F, and also through publications which you can find on withtheterriblefate.com. Okay, I could be a little bit louder, but it is fixed, so that's something. Are we good?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay,
now,
excellent.
Grail, maybe you could help. Is it that Aaron is coming through quiet, or is it that the game is too loud?
Yeah, is it me relative to Dan or relative to the game? Because we can switch those things up in our setup.
It needed to be in mono, that was it.
Ah, got it. Well, I'm glad I knew enough about audio setup to at least gesture at a question
weird,
that allowed us to reach the solution.
We were saying before stream began that OBS is really nice, but it's also a host of its own technical issues. And on mine, it automates to mono.
Hilarious.
Yeah, so I don't know why that did that, but
Well, we got there at least.
yep.
Yeah, well, we can definitely move the.
Oh, that might be it. It might be you, Grill.
Yeah, I think at
think
that
we're
point,
good.
yeah. If it's just that your volume is quiet, we can't troubleshoot that. Yes, but if you turn it up and you find a balancing issue, let us know, and we can certainly adjust that too.
As long as you can hear us in the game, we're good. And then we'll go into audio mixing territory when
Yes.
we must.
For now, we can go into Tales territory, though. This is the first stream in a week where we haven't had to synopsize over 60 hours of JRPG adventure on the fly for someone new on the stream. So I guess I can put it to you, Dan, and just ask, not to put you on the spot in terms of, recapitulate the whole game, but as you were playing through the last stream, and since you're
I'll tell you
newer
what I got
to-
from last time.
Yeah, so tell us what you've been thinking about from last time, and if you had been
So-
considering anything afterwards that might be worth revisiting as we go forward here.
So we're in the end game. We're going to the heart of the world to find Lambda, this kind of like supposedly dark entity from which monsters spawn. But we also saw a bunch of flashbacks that kind of intimated that he was either made that way, or the kind of trauma that he experienced led to kind of these bad things happening or budding off of him. Because his kind of father figure, Cornell, wanted him to be like... actually, I think, Grail, you said like it was like Pinocchio, and it did seem that way. Like he was like a Geppetto trying to make
A real
this
boy.
kid into a real
Yeah.
boy. But when Cornell died, when he was killed by Emerald,
Very good. You're better at the names than I am.
it kind of broke Lambda, and I think that so that's the kind of like macro look at what we're doing. So we're going there to figure out what's going on with Lambda, but also save Richard, who's like possessed by Lambda, or is a vessel for him right now.
Yeah, was seemingly possessed and then seemed to be a willing participant in that possession after that.
So this is a question I had after we've stopped, and maybe this is a twist that is going to be revealed. Is Richard a humanoid?
No, so at least as far as we know at this point in the game, we have no
He's
reason
not.
to believe
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Because I was wondering, is it just them that can be like influenced by Lambda? Because he was kind of puppeting a shell of the little boy Lambda,
Yeah.
and it looks like there's like a couple of those wandering around, or at least two of them.
We do have reason to believe that whatever else Lambda may or may not be, he's capable of influencing actual individuals, because even with Richard to the side, the way in which the party got to know Emerald was when they went to this other world that she came from. They met actually, I talked myself around in a circle about that, because I forgot one of the things we learned last time, which is easy to overlook, is that the party thought they had met Emerald, but
it
in
was a
fact,
humanoid.
looking at those flashbacks, we saw that the version they saw was almost certainly a humanoid.
She was
after
in a
all.
wheelchair. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, as pottery suggests.
Richard's
For
a
all
real
intents
boy.
and purposes, as far as we know, Richard is a real boy. The genuine article. But it's a good thing to keep in mind as we go forward, that notwithstanding, especially in a game with humanoids and with Sophie, is that a distinction with a difference in this game or not?
Well, I'm kind of leaning towards no,
Yo.
in a very with a terrible fate kind of way. But yeah, so we're going down there, and I want to find out, just based on what I've seen, because I've only seen what we did last stream of Tales of Graces. I want to see how willing Richard was, and I want to see if that's because he understood that Lambda was a scared child, because that seems to be what's happening. And my guess would be, unless Richard has done horrible things with Lambda's power, which I don't know, has he?
Yeah, interesting
Yes,
question.
okay.
Well, no, it's interesting because we have kind of been led to believe that it's horrible in large part just because of the monsters that spawn from and surround Lambda, but really all that he seems to have been doing so far is absorbing the energy of the world, not waging war or anything like that.
Okay.
And what we saw to be Richard's aspiration, even when he was a child, was that he desperately wanted to figure out how to put an end to war. And so we've seen these little snippets of his time with Lambda that basically seem to be suggesting whatever influence Lambda might be exerting on him is basically exerted through this kind of promise that by using Lambda's power, he'll be able to put an end to war. Maybe through means that we don't want, but by preventing nations from causing war with each other.
That's a fair question, Pottery. So here's, this kind of wraps into my question, what I'm going to be looking for at the end. Is it something we don't understand, or is it a failing of Richard's that he's not seeing that that's happening? I want to see that, because to me, again, having no background, from the stuff that I saw with Lambda, I would think that it's either going to be read as that's a childish desire that can't be done, right? And you kind of have to grow up and realize that, both for Richard or Lambda. Or it's going to be like, oh, we've misinterpreted everything that's happened, and Richard has been doing X to get Y result.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to keep in mind too as we go forward, just the idea of who is responsible or not for what. Like we were talking about a bit last time, and as Grail pointed out, there are a lot of attempts at achieving things in this game that are thwarted. And there is an interesting sense, I think, in which the nations of the world are kind of at war, vying for each other's power sources at the start of the game, and then kind of ironically, even though Richard might not have been, directly bringing about an end to war through his actions with Lambda, it was through this kind of existential crisis of the world losing its energy that the nations did decide to come together and basically form a truce to figure out how to deal with this threat that was facing all of them. So kind of perhaps ironically affecting what he wanted after a fashion.
He's Ozymandias from Watchmen.
Right, there you go. We got there, exactly. I think those are the big strokes.
Cool.
I'm excited. I'm also going to remember before we move on to put Pascal on auto so that we don't discover that in the middle of the battle. For once, he's prepared. How about that? That's right, the ghost. Speaking of Ghost in the Shell. Did that actually stick? Yeah, okay, we're good. Are you still good with Hubert? Did you want to try someone else?
No, I'm used to him.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I figure the other thing that we were in the middle of when we wrapped up was getting Asbel's Excalibur, the family sword, really the realm sword, which had been conveyed to his father, back. So I figured we could wrap that up. There are other side quests, but we're also so tuned into the conclusion.
But this will be good for fighting.
Go back to that. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're going to go to the Marcian Enclave, which we stumbled into at the beginning of last stream. But yes, this is the little the hideaway where the race/descendants of engineers who were thought to be distinct, in fact, are still hanging out on Affinia. All right, we should be able to go. There is also a Coliseum if you want to test your strength with all of your deep battle knowledge now. That's right, there was something else to do in Pascal's house. But here's the thing, and we can also decide to pull in the threads of side quests all night. That will then just be what we're doing, because it's that stage in a JRPG. So, but we can make a game day call. Let's figure out what's going on with the sword first. I kind of just want
to see the end.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was feeling too. This is the Overseer.
Give us a good chunk to talk about too.
Yeah. Pardon me, Overseer, but there's something we need you to see. The Overseer says you have brought something she has not seen in a long time. She asks if that is truly Excalibur. It is, but as you can see, it's rusted through. Do you know if there's a way to repair it? She says she does. Then may we ask her assistance? This weapon will be a great help in the fight against Lambda. She says you will need the Argo Iris to repair Excalibur. Ah, it looks like you already have it. There you go. Sometimes things work out. Yeah, the fun thing about this is we also found out, speaking of little quirks of humor in a Tales game like Tales of Grace, is that the best understanding of why the overseer doesn't talk is she found out a few years ago that she speaks in an incredibly heavy accent that she'd never been aware of, and so she's really embarrassed about it.
Excellent.
You mean this? Exactly. With this, we can repair the sword. Please wait here. The overseer says she will repair it herself. She hasn't done something like this in 50 years. Oh, wow. Thanks so much.
Is the turtles the lady in the lake?
Okay, now, of course, we have to take it the bridge too far to bring Lila into the universe, and he's the shepherd, and everything is everything else. Great minds, Grail. So too with ours. It is finished. I've never seen such a brilliant gleam. Thank you so much, Overseer. You too, Poisson.
Stay fishy, Poisson.
I'm glad I was able to witness the Overseer's work firsthand. I think she enjoyed herself, didn't you, Overseer? I did indeed. So much so that she spoke. She spoke! She can talk! Amazing. The holy sword once owned by Aston, now fully repaired. It's also known as the Eleth Sword. Awesome. It's got me thinking too, this is a very Tales thing. I'm trying to think of other proximate examples in games, but the idea that when you think about different ways in which you can manipulate energy, something that comes up in Tales of Vesperia too, but it's presented initially in the game as this kind of awful thing that the antagonist is abusing, with Richard going around and absorbing literally all of the energy sources from the world, and then as you unwind the different character arcs and help the protagonist understand themselves, they also end up absorbing and using energy for their own beneficent and more directed means. Like Sophie went back to the place where she first manifested outside Asbel's hometown and absorbed the Eleth from there to basically fortify them against Lambda before they went in to penetrate him. And now we have the idea of the sword being able to do something similar.
That's interesting. It's funny because I'm thinking of something that will no doubt come up on my stream when I do my like Kingdom Hearts Praxis, but it reminds me of the character Vanitas, from whom like all of this negativity is spawned, but then he also reabsorbs it to try to become whole again.
Yeah.
I really like that idea that like we're spawning energy from ourselves and then reincorporating it, like I did with Matt.
That's right. It is all connected. Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways you can skin the cat in terms of things that JRPGs and especially the Tales series are concerned with, but I think the different cycles of energy and the way in which we like constitute our individuality out of the kind of life stream of energy that's common to everyone is definitely something that they're commonly concerned with, and that's part of what's been fun for me about the Tales games, like as I'm sure you would do with Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts. The more you get into the details of breaking down each game and the way in which it explains its energy in terms of the technical sci-fi or fantasy elements of each world, more often than not it ends up having unique and pretty interesting metaphorical implications for what it's saying about those themes. That's right. I forget if this has come up before, but Pottery is the self-proclaimed super fan of Tales of Vesperia. That's right. So it's always it's a clock on the stream in terms of who will mention it first and why. But sometimes I beat him to it. We also, it's not surprising in this case because, as Dan mentioned last time, he's on a mission to get me to watch all of Attack on Titan before we go to Japan. And I was noticing some, with no spoilers, especially for me, because I just started Attack on Titan. But in the first episode,
we only watched one episode, so don't say anything.
But I noticed some interesting parallels, and if you know, you know. So I have my ears pricked for that.
My favorite, that's a great question, Grill. My favorite Goofy Kingdom Hearts line, because there's a whole host of them, but it's not maybe like traditionally goofy, but I love the way that Haley Joel Osment says the line, "You're stupid." Like that in the first one, he's talking to Riku, because Riku's basically spouting JRPG nonsense, and Sora's reaction is, "You're stupid." So that's my favorite.
That's pretty on point.
Yep. Yeah, there's any number of it's like I don't know if it's the certain flavor of the game or if it's a similar kind of thing that happened with Final Fantasy or other games that were ported over from Japan in the 90s, where the liberty of translating is up to some pretty funny people sometimes. And so it just reminds me of lines like in Final Fantasy VII, when Cloud, as the kind of Arrested Development character, trying to be older than he is mentally, is rallying the troops, and his rallying cry is, "Let's mosey."
Such a perfect, long and convoluted build-up to that famous line. It's funny because I think especially nowadays, given the common vernacular of the world, like there's probably a whole generation of gamers that only knows that word because of
Final
that
Fantasy
localization
VII,
of Final Fantasy VII.
I was watching, I can't remember, some Let's Player, and he was saying that he learned how to read from Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, wow.
I just thought that was really cool.
That is fun.
Oh, did Rolling Thunderbolt get... The arts wouldn't have changed, would they?
I don't think so. We can check.
No, okay.
Yeah, you got it on just your regular circle attack.
Cool.
Let's Mosey does sound like the perfect name for a series about Final Fantasy VII translation, for obvious reasons.
I haven't seen that, but that's the second time I've been recommended that video, so I have to get on that.
It seems like something that would be right up your alley.
Mm. There's a guy I like, I'll give him a shout out because I actually interviewed him. He's a nice guy. A guy named Game Gengo, a guy named Matt. He's a English guy who lives in Kyoto, and he does like learn Japanese through playing Japanese games.
Mm.
And we had a good conversation about like the trials and tribulations of translations and localizations, giving us a false understanding of what the language is.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because you will play games in Japanese sometimes, right?
All the time, yeah, if I have the opportunity.
Do you have any favorite insights that you've gleaned from playing games that maybe you originally played in English in the original Japanese that changed the way in which you think about them?
Yeah, I mean, a ton. I'll have to come up with like a really fun stream one. I think like one of my favorite things is, so I'll just stick with Kingdom Hearts because that's the example that comes to my mind. There's a really great kind of like scene comparison that I like to do with two of the scenes with Axel in them.
Mm.
And the first one is when he confronts Roxas. And that is like almost a one-to-one perfect translation, like what we got. But there's another one, the other famous Axel scene that you and I both love, which is when he's telling Shion that, you know, you just keep running, I'll always be there to bring you back. In the English, his line is, everybody thinks they're right?
Yeah.
But the Japanese is this phrase, doitsumo koitsumo. And what that means is like, it literally means like, this guy, that guy. But what it colloquially means is like, God damn, like nobody's talking sense. You know?
Yeah.
And then that's led into, he uses this phrase. So I can't remember what he says in the English. It's basically like, he says, "What's your problem?" in English. But in Japanese, he says, "Fuzaken na!" which basically means "Don't fuck with me."
Wow.
So it's a bit tonally different from what we get.
Gives a little bit of a different insight into his character and what he's wrestling with,
While conveying, I feel, the same tone of the scene, but I love stuff like that, where it's like, learn the, not just the words, but the tonality and like the context that they would use certain things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, a language is so much more than just like the translation of words. They exist in a cultural context. It can be hard to get that to translate. Although I have to say, with at least the apparent care that we get from translations nowadays, it does feel
It's
like
very
the
different.
teams are attuned to that in a way
Well,
that they perhaps weren't.
I actually had a professor in college. I'm say her name. I won't say her name. But, she was really lovely, and she was so she was a Japanese woman, and she grew up in California, and we had these conversations about how she, like, the way that it used to work nowadays, the way it works is that companies like Square Enix or Atlas or Bandai Namco have these whole teams of translators, right, that they pay salaries to. But back in the day, it was just like freelance. So it was, okay, if you can speak Japanese and English, then we're going to have you, like, you can get $50 for a day translating this. So she would tell me all these stories about, like, JRPGs that she had translated, where she would spend, like, a week at a time making $400 for rent to just, like, translate item descriptions and stuff. But then she also, she had said, like, oh, you know, there was some Genesis game I played, or not Genesis. There's some Dreamcast game that I did, and I don't know. It was like about like you know, this Japanese guy who was like living in like a suburb, and it was like he was trying to get revenge for his father, and you know, there was all this like, you know, kitschy stuff, and I'm just like, are you talking about Shenmue? And she goes, yeah, that's it. I translated all of the like gotcha items in that.
Oh man,
and I was like, oh,
that's
so
awesome.
Like one of the, you know, cult Dreamcast classics that everybody loves, Shenmue. My professor just like haphazardly worked on for a week.
Hilarious.
Yep. So
Without
that's just how
any idea of its impact. Yeah.
That's just how it was. It was just a job. It was like an odd job back then. So you look at like those funny translations in older, like especially text-based games, like the early Final Fantasies, and it's just like maybe there was some professionalism to it, but also maybe it was a 23-year-old Japanese person who needed money for rent.
Yeah. Man, it almost like you hear, speaking of languages and cultures, right? You hear what a different culture was just around translation. It's almost like you need different rules of play or a schema for thinking about, you know, how those people were translating things into, you know, their own context and the meaning that they wanted to make out of it, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, that raises a good question too, because I don't know to what extent there was like editorializing by somebody on the game dev team, because I imagine there's plenty of games out there where it's like, all right, I'm playing one kind of chunk of it or one chapter of it, and then I go to another one and it's like somebody else wrote this.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's probably because, you know, all right, this is your job, you're going to translate this 3 hours of it, or you're going to translate this sub-menu. And so like any kind of dissonance that you might have felt in those old games, especially like old Nintendo Entertainment System games, it's probably because like 8 different people had
It's
their
like an
input.
authorial mosaic, yeah.
And the deadlines and resources they were given were often brutal. Yeah. That is for sure. I mean, as much as we talk about like crunch and awful deadlines nowadays, like back then when Final Fantasy VII came out in 97 and then Final Fantasy VIII came out in 98, like at the end of 98.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating aspect of it that verges into what we like to talk about, because, like you say, authorial mosaic, but then there's also like, how do you take a game like that and kind of look at the authorial intent when there's all those people who had that kind of say in it, so.
What's this?
If I'm correct, when you rotate this pedestal, the giant spheres on this floor change position in a similar way.
I see. So the positions of the small spheres on the pedestal are connected to the larger spheres?
It looks that way. If you were to draw a line out from the small spheres and look in that direction,
Oh, you can see the large spheres.
now we just have to figure out how to use this to our advantage.
Yes.
It's interesting the timing of those skits, how the characters are only like ready to discuss that once you've kind of already figured out enough of it as a player. It's like that's evident to us at this point, but then it makes sense why it would be evident to them as well. Yeah, I almost feel like, I wonder whether people have ever done interesting cultural studies on this in terms of how those sorts of mosaics that we're talking about have impacted gamers in the way that they think about media, because I'm put in mind when you say that of how, as I'm sure we know, something like game development nowadays still takes a village, and while there are auteurs, there are also many people who have their hands in it and contribute to different parts of it in different ways. So it's still a mosaic, right? It just might sometimes nowadays seem more seamless. And I wonder whether, for example, like people who are familiar with or grew up with what we now think of as retro games, if like the degree to which you saw the seams made you more attuned to just like thinking about that aspect of the multimedia unit, even now that it's harder to see those seams. You know what I mean?
We've talked before on, I think this was, years and years ago on one of our podcasts about, like the moment we can rehash it here because I don't know if you remember this, but the moment that you realize that somebody made a video game, right?
Yes,
Like where it's like, oh, this didn't just happen. This existed. I mean, similar to like when you're a kid and you realize like, oh, somebody wrote this book.
Yeah, right. It's an artifact of work. It didn't just come out of thin air.
Right. Just going back to Grail's comment, when he confronts Roxas, doesn't he do that like 60 times? Yeah, that's their whole thing.
That's their relationship.
I meant the
confrontation.
first big one.
I feel like a bit of a fool for thinking that we are right on the precipice of the big boss door in this dungeon, Dan. I feel like I should have known better.
I'm sure there's another. We're getting there.
Yeah,
We're
step
getting
by
there.
step.
It's the final dungeons for you.
I'm just gonna fucking discard it. I'm gonna keep making that same mistake.
Okay, let's do this.
That's the thing I'm most known for on these adventures, Dan.
Making the same
is,
mistake.
Yep, picking up the same thing I can't pick up from a treasure chest again and again.
I remember I was so happy when Twilight Princess introduced, like, you can't hold this rupee, so you're going to put it back in now.
Right. So obviously you're still getting attuned to the battle system, but especially given your experience with other Tales games and JRPGs, how are you feeling about this one as you get into it a bit more?
I think, so far, I think I've told you this, my favorite battle style of these, because they're all a little different, right?
Yeah.
My favorite is Berseria, because I love the, I feel like they made it almost like a fighting game, where it's just like, it's such an emphasis on combos, which I found really rewarding. This one, in the homework that I was given, it said that, like everybody's kind of like a glass cannon a little bit, or at the very least, like this is a game where you really have to watch being hit, which I think is fairly different from the other ones that I've played. But
It was Grail who wrote that, by the way. If
Oh,
I
there you
didn't
go,
mention
Grail,
that,
so I read my homework. So, but I think I like I didn't get used to the Dawn of the New World like free roam thing, because I had been playing games where it was either you don't get to do that or it's just built in that you do that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm still getting used to that, but I like the I feel like the guarding and the strafing is more fun in this one, since you have to do it or you'll get torn apart.
It does seem like it has a special language for rewarding dodging and getting out of the way of attacks in a way that you don't get in the other games.
Symphonia kind of has that, but it's not as intuitive as this one is, I feel like.
No, it's more developed in this. That's something that we talk about on the stream sometimes, is especially if you look at, I think kind of uniquely Tales of Symphonia, in terms of the gameplay language of a lot of the Tales games of that era. You can read it as very much prototypical of what they would then go on to further develop in different ways that made sense for the particulars of the different further games that they published after that.
What are the big TOP hot take factories that we need Dan's takes on?
That's a good question. I feel like the gang will have a better memory than I do, so feel free to jump in. I mean, so I see it in two camps. One is like the interesting, substantive, like theoretical questions, and then the other very campy things. So of course, like any good academics, will start with the really campy things. So, do you? What are easy ones? Do you have like favorite game, favorite hero, favorite villain, and why? I feel like those are easy questions that we haven't talked about. And
For
now,
Tales?
now you're getting sufficient background with them that you can make some judgments.
My favorite game is Berseria.
Okay, you're settled on that.
Yes, that I've played. Of the ones that I've played,
Right.
that's my favorite.
Yep.
But I also told Aaron that with every game that I play, I say that it's my favorite. So,
That's true. Like you fall more in love with the entire series every
Yes.
time you play a successive entry. And
But I think
it's great to see.
I love Berseria because I love... And here's the thing. I don't think it would be my favorite if I hadn't put so much time in Zestiria, for obvious reasons, right? But I loved Zestiria because this is something that we talked about in our private lives, but I don't know if you mentioned it on stream, but one of the things that I loved about Zestiria was that Sore is this character who, kind of similar to what we do when we play games,
This is called Vesperion, by the way.
Oh, cool. He had this idealized perception of what the shepherd was, and he had that because he read the Earth and Historia, right? And I just love the idea that he is being told at every point, like, that's not what you're supposed to do, that's not possible, and his reaction at everything is just like, well, I disagree because my whole understanding of this role that I'm taking on is that I can do that, so I'm going to do it. And I just love the optimism of that. And then to have that experience, and then to go to Berseria as the sequel, and see, like, people who are just as driven as he is, but also, like, deeply cynical about how the world works while still trying to help each other. I found that to be a really cool mirror to Zestiria, and I loved how it only strengthened, like, the characters' resolve and conviction with their own personal journeys. Like, I really loved Rokuro's whole story. I think he's probably my favorite character in all the games that I've played.
Sure.
Because he's my favorite archetype anyway, of, like, idiot with a heart of gold.
Right.
But I also love his story with his brother, and actually, his brother is voiced by the guy who voices Mugen in Samurai Champloo, where I take my stream name from. So I was immediately endeared to that, and just the whole, like, story with Laphicet and the kind of twinning aspect of it, I just thought was really solid and well done. So I think, to me, that's the one that I most look forward to going back to. And I think from all that I've experienced with it, that has most of my favorite stuff in it.
Okay, so I heard most of the answers in there. How about favorite villain? Would that also be Artorias, or does that straddle a different game?
No, it wouldn't be Artorias, because I didn't consider him one. In the sense of, like, I found Yggdrasil to be like a villain. Like, I was talking about how like, just this at every turn his sister is like, you shouldn't do this, like, this is something that I don't want. And for him to be so self-absorbed to proceed anyway and be so far down the rabbit hole, I really saw him as villainous. Artorias, I felt like, similar to Heldalf, actually, made me feel like, oh man, he's this guy who's driven by the role that he has assumed, and he just doesn't see a way out of it. And I feel like the world of Zestiria and Berseria is very much like, you know, the rules are set, the fate is sealed, the roles are being played by the people who need to play them.
Yeah.
And so that kind of melancholy of both of those characters just, like, recognizing that they have to fill that seat a little bit, I think is that puts it more in like the antagonist camp and not the villain camp for me.
Sure.
So that said, yeah, I think of the ones that I've played, I mean, my favorite is, and I'm gonna call him Viral because that's what I called him the entire time I played it. But the antagonist of Arise, the Last Lord.
Oh, sure. Now his name has fallen out of my head
Right,
too.
yeah.
But yeah.
Because he's despicable, I think.
Volron, thank you.
Volron, yeah. I love Volron as a villain because he's like, to quote Mr. Plinkett, he's evil and he loves it.
Sure. Well, he's very angry.
Yes. And he's capable and he's driven and he has his whole perception of how, you know, the world works and that he's going to make it work for him. And I think that's really cool. And that was the first one that I really dove into. So
Yeah, that's what really got you into the series, right?
Mhm.
It was Arise. Now then, is there one which you're most excited to pick up next?
Vesperia, from what we've talked about. I think that's probably next. I got to
Well,
finish.
I'm going to make you play Eternia while you're out here, though.
Yes, yeah, but when my own play, yeah, I think Vesperia is the one, and then I got to finish Abyss too, because I'm.
Oh, that's right. I
I'm
forgot
like
you
a
were
fourth
working
of the way
that.
through it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to work through the rest of that.
I'm enjoying it like a meal. Like it's very. I really like the world.
It can be a lot to digest, to be sure. Yeah. Yeah, Pottery especially thinks that Vesperia was pretty heavily influenced by Tales of the Abyss. That's something
Oh,
that we
really?
talked about
Okay.
quite a lot.
Well,
yeah.
maybe I'll do that then.
Yeah,
on-
you do
on
see a lot of
recommendation.
similar notes in them. I was trying to find the right time to mention this, but my controller is having a stroke, which I don't know what to deal with. It's like it's vibrating. It's stuck in perpetual vibration
Continuously?
position. Yeah.
If you turn it off, will that?
I don't
Can you
know
turn
how
it
to
off
turn
and on
it
again?
off. I can try plugging it in. That might fix it. It's
What
truly-
caused that?
I don't know. Probably Lambda. There we go. Okay, that reset it.
That's really weird.
Thank God. Never
Never
a dull
possess the
moment.
controller.
Clothing worn by a couple who turn their blades upon each other when their love soured. Fatal attraction. How about that? I guess anyone can equip it.
Dan is based for loving Rokuro. Yeah, I just I love the whole setup, and I also love that his like family is like, oh, so it's so like the only thing we have is repaying our debts. Like, I just love little things like that. So
Did you ever end up finishing the side quests in Berseria? Oh, you
Gone
should
back to
really
them.
go back to that. There's a great one that gives some really interesting further color on Rokuro's family, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
oh, I'm psyched. But yeah, I really like Berseria.
Yeah, I had a feeling it would really resonate with you.
I like the as much as we've talked about like loving the optimism of JRPGs, I really liked the dark tone of that game because it was noticeably different for me after playing the games that I did.
How long is it?
So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Why is he lying?
Well, Tempest is one of the ones that they never localized, right, Pottery? That's probably why. I don't even know, because I know some of the ones that have not been localized have fan translations, but I don't know if that was one of them.
They've disowned it. What is that? Does that mean they've outright said like are bad, or like they just don't talk about it? Because I'm interested in either scenario.
I don't know. Yeah, that's beyond the reach of my Tales history. Disowned it in terms of quality.
An
yeah.
escort title.
put it to the side of the main line.
That's a choice.
Man, that makes me much more interested in wanting to figure out
Yeah,
how to
what-
play it at
yeah,
some
right.
point.
The black sheep.
Yeah, what could possibly make a mainline entry that bad?
I serve to protect.
Oh my goodness, it goes on and on.
Sequels and crossover. It's like, you know, like any of the, like Final Fantasy Type 0 or whatever the hell that game was. Just like, put it over here.
Right. Oh my god, yes, I'm just realizing that now each one of these is a different warp point.
Oh no.
Oh no. Well, we have a skip to ground us at least.
I'm scared. My chest is so tight.
Jared is fine.
Let's assure the objective is not to fight King Richard. It's to eradicate Lambda.
That's got to be deliberate, right?
It's hurting him.
What do you mean?
King Richard?
Richard.
There's a lot of Shakespeare,
Okay.
especially in the earlier acts of this that are focused on the monarchy.
Gotcha.
Like the evil uncle, like I was talking about, who usurps him.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Mutual destruction function. There is no need to consider that option.
Yes, I understand.
Then we're ready. Let's go, everyone. The Lost Talia is just ahead.
It wasn't just ahead.
After these 19 warp points. Oh. Yeah, Beast Blaster is pretty rad.
You're becoming a deep Hubert fan at this point. For all the complexity of the puzzles, it was nice to have a stream kickoff where we were actually capable of controlling the characters. Sometimes it's the little things, you know?
Well as could be expected.
In fairness to Matt, if you've never played a Tales game and you jump into the final dungeon,
Yeah, good luck. That's true. You do at least have a bare bones point of
Yeah.
reference that
Yeah.
you did not. Shout out to Matt. I love you, brother. If you end up finding your way into the stream. He's the best sport.
he really
Although I
is.
have no problem telling the stream that I don't think it was a coincidence. After we did the stream, he also insisted we play Mario Kart, which I'm awful at, and handily trounced me
That's
every single
retribution.
time. That's right.
Yeah.
You have to rebalance the scales.
It's true. It's like when we play Smash with him too.
Right. No, he didn't beat Bloodborne. Good memory, Potter. Thank you for asking.
But no, absolutely not.
He got close on Vicar Amelia. I
Yeah,
think
he's
it's
doing
fair
pretty
to say
well.
he got close.
Yeah. He was also pretty underleveled, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted to grind levels at all. And he refused to use any fire-based items, which
Or any of the upgrade materials that he got.
yeah, or the people who wanted him to summon him. He was handicapping himself a little bit. I think it's fair to say.
Okay, let's do this.
Derogatory. I know. I was thinking that too because I was initially, not initially. The whole time I was enjoying making fun of him in spite of myself because that's the kind of relationship we have. But it was making fun of the worst and deepest set qualities of myself too because like. I know from experience with those games the number of times I fail, and every time I'm looking to blame the game and shake my fist at the design and overlook the million things I'm not taking advantage of and just say, why is it so unfair to me?
It's so funny to me too because I know you get that way with them, and then I'll get like frustrated at a boss, but then the way I play games, I love grinding. So if I lose, I'm like, oh good, an excuse for me
yay.
to go somewhere else.
That's true. Yeah, it's just like you get to your post-game grind sooner than you otherwise would, so it's a special treat.
Somebody turn me to a rock.
Alright, I'm gonna say we might need some healing support besides the healers at this point. Though I will shout you out, Grail, it was definitely a good idea to put both Sherry and Sophie in this particular situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. This lizard fell. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Grail was pointing out, if you didn't realize this, putting the L stick in different directions during your X attacks can set you up for different combos. Like those are also different attacks.
Oh, okay.
I thought about that pottery, but I felt like it might be a hat on a hat just for the amount of time that we're playing. But I guess since you do have Berseria recently in your head, it's pretty similar to that. So also, if you end up wanting to fool around with this, you're welcome to. So each of the attacks you see, they have different, I think we can call them attributes. They hit different enemy weaknesses.
Okay.
So different enemies will have like a different set of weaknesses, and if you hit them with attacks that correspond to all of those, you get big bonuses, basically. No, Dan will be here for
I'll be
a
here,
while. I
yeah.
just, we'll be here through the 28th is when we're off to Japan, and then we'll probably be doing streaming adventures of a different color while we're over there, if I know us, and I think I do. Yeah, I do feel like it's not. This is maybe giving us too much credit, but I feel like just the natural diversity of our attacks has been making it such that we've been, without trying too much, like hitting most of the enemy weaknesses in a lot of the situations where it counts. So maybe that's being too generous, but I feel like we're doing okay without thinking about it too consciously. That's true. I will own what Pottery is saying, and you know this about the way I game, so this is no surprise to you. I am very explicitly not investing in weaknesses, but I think about them sometimes. I think about them to the same amount that I think about typing in Pokemon.
Yes, well, I am Mr. Min-Max over here. So.
I know you are,
Yeah.
Mr. Min-Max.
Like, when I realized that in Zestiria, the herb bonuses carried over, and like you could spend grade to do that, I was like,
That's fair, and I will own and appreciate that, Pottery, because I think you'll agree that resonates with me. Like, I contemplate what it would be to invest in the weaknesses, and then I make a conscious, reflective decision not to do that. The Forgotten Ones. Oh, man.
Messed up.
Oh. I didn't ask for that.
use tools.
These must be the remains of humanoids who worked on the Ghardia Shaft. The people
Can you sound a little bummed out about it?
Seriously, no. Pascal doesn't have that gene. That skipped her generation.
thank you for your hard work, everyone.
Sophie has it for everyone, though.
These humanoids fulfilled their duty, their mission. It's not sad.
It's a little sad.
Come on, Sophie.
The mutual destruction thing again.
Just a little bit.
No, I'm not.
Do they all have that, or is it just her?
I want to be
Like, if any humanoid found Lambda, would they be like, would they be like the androids to Goku?
So the way that Emerald explained it, and of course at this point she's at least a little bit of an unreliable narrator, I would say, but so Sophie is a humanoid specifically designated Protos Haze as this like entity that was engineered to destroy Lambda. So she represented it as a
She's Android
something-
16.
Yeah, exactly.
Yo.
Yes.
Okay, I'm up to speed.
Short
Now
band.
you're speaking my mind. Now
Yeah,
we're
that-
renting bloody weeklies from the same bloody Blockbuster video, mate.
Oi! Yeah, there are worse people to be compared to in Pokemon than Ash, I think. I can live
great.
with that. If that is my fate, it is not such a terrible
And
one.
I get to be Gary, and I get 10 badges in a region that only has 8 of them.
That does explain why I feel a certain way about Gary and about you, Dan. That tracks.
Smell you later.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I will smell you later.
I'm going to smell you later.
Speaking of, we were going to do.
Speaking of smelling me later.
Speaking of smelling you later, we were going to do Pokemon stream last night
Oh, okay.
on my
It's
stream,
like, what the hell?
but Aaron dropped Matt off, and we were all kind of exhausted, so we just decided against it. But I think, I'm up for tomorrow, so that's usually when I do my Poke stream.
I am in your hands.
So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Grail points out, and this is actually one of the things that we were having fun with because I know you know this, if not from the games, then with talking about me, talking with me about some of my work on the games. They're very self-consciously concerned with name-based storytelling.
Yeah.
This is a really fun game to do that with, like to ask the question, well, why is it called Lambda? What does Protos Haste have to do with anything? Yeah, so, and Protos Haste, this is one I wish I had actually taken some of those classics classes.
Yeah, what is it?
Protos Haste.
Haste?
Yeah, I think we decided it's Greek because there's a lot of Greek in this. Lambda, of course, is Greek. And the best I was able to do from translations online is that it's like a numeral identification of like the first one, indicating that like there would presumably be others down the line.
Yeah.
So sort of like a test case or something prototypical.
Where we get prototype, surely, right?
Yeah.
Pokemon should evolve past turn-based 4-move combat, aka a heretic. I think, I don't know. I think if you haven't played Scarlet and Violet or Arceus for that matter, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Exhausting. I loved Arceus, so
This was your first one, wasn't it?
the first one in recent history.
Colosseum and Gale of Darkness were your first ones.
Good
You have
memory.
the strangest entry into Pokemon.
I do. I
Yeah.
have a very weird entry, but yeah, I'm not sure whether I've told the story on the stream, but I was never really a big die-hard fan of the mainline games growing up. In fact, as Dan says, I got into it through kind of the weird offshoots, I guess you might say the escort titles of the Pokemon series. And then Arceus and the idea of exploring and just living alongside Pokemon in that kind of like primordial world from which like all of the other games would be begotten just found me at the right time when I really wanted to live inside of that kind of world. And so I just had such pure and really rewarding memories of my time in that, kind of irrespective of like my relationship with the broader series. So
It's a very engaging story and world, Arceus,
Yeah.
if you haven't played them before. And then it only gets more interesting when you've played more of them, I think. One thing that I think I'm curious about is, because, like, Grail, I think you're kind of, like, jokingly talking about, like, an action RPG for Pokemon, but in this recent DLC, they introduced this thing called the Synchro Machine, which is somebody at the Blueberry Academy in the Unova region, speaking of black and white, created this thing called the Synchro Machine where you can basically like connect your brainwaves to your Pokemon, and then you can like move them around the world. And so I wonder if that's not, speaking of like prototypes, if that's not like a test case to see how much interest there is in that for like a game where the special evolution, instead of it being the Terra type or the Mega Evolution or whatever, is like you bond with your Pokemon and then you fight as one kind of being,
Oh, that sounds awesome.
which I think would be very cool.
Does feel very JRPG.
And it seems to be kind of the next step, like, because they've done, you know, this makes it stronger, this makes it bigger, this makes it a different type, right? It's like, well, what if, you know, you just merged with the Pokemon, right?
Yeah, so what would make you think that Scarlet Violet is different? I would echo Potter's point, and I would put my button on that because, like, I know that you and I have talked about this, but especially after Arceus going into Scarlet and Violet, like, I played Violet, I really liked it, but one of the things that was interesting to me was when I would get on the phone and gripe to you about points of friction I was having with it, it was almost always with things that were more constitutive of the typical Pokemon formula of, you know, going around to gyms and doing the sort of more structured and rubric things that were, you know, part of the original structure of the games and very non-Arceus, right? So do you see Scarlet Violet as a broader departure?
Yes, and I think that, but it's important to remember that, so we're talking about like Mothership and, what was it, Escort
yeah.
games? So the way that the Pokemon company develops their games is so crazy because they put one out like every year. And the way that they kind of get away with that, well, they don't really, but the way that they the way that they try new things is that, all right, we have the mainline Pokemon game, like Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet that just came out. But then we also have the kind of escort games like Arceus is, And what those games routinely have always done is they've tested the waters for new ideas and seen how the reaction to them works. The problem is the development cycle is so close that it's not. They maybe have some ideas of what they want to port from the like experimental game to the mainline game. So, for example, in Arceus, you have all the different Pokemon that you can ride around, and they all do a different thing that you call with the Pokeflute. In Scarlet and Violet, you can clearly tell like they were going to keep that idea no matter what, because Koraidon and Miraidon, the Pokemon that you ride around on, they're able to basically get all of those abilities at once, right?
Yeah.
So clearly, they were like, okay, we're going to do this in Arceus, and we already know this is something that we're keeping regardless of whether or not people like it. We're going to get rid of the HM moves like Surf and all of those things, and it's just going to be like the partner Pokemon you get from the beginning is going to be able to do all of them eventually. So then, though, I think something that they weren't sure would catch on was the method of catching Pokemon in Arceus that's so fun and fluid, which I remember you lamenting to me about missing in Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they were testing the waters to see if people would like that. But you have to remember, as they were doing that, they didn't have time to get the feedback because Scarlet and Violet was already in development alongside Arceus. So the way that their system has always worked has been you have the experimental side game like the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee games. Then you have the main game that incorporates some of the stuff, but they wait to incorporate more stuff until the next mainline game when it's clear what people like and what people don't. So it's a super weird production cycle that I think everybody who's a Pokemon fan feels like they should just take 5 years and just do like an amazing game, right?
It's kind of like you're constantly watching them build the airplane you're already flying in as it's in the air.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Because they don't have the capability to stop. Pokemon is the most lucrative franchise in the world. They can't stop. It's the most any franchise has ever made, and so for them to not pump out the new idea alongside the kind of tried and true method, it's a gamble that they've never wanted to take. And I think if they did it once, that would be enough for them to do that forever. But I think that they're also very conscious of the mainline game like Scarlet and Violet. So Potter, I think to your point, right, it is rooted in the old games because the Pokemon Company is very conscious of this is going to be somebody's first Pokemon game. And they're not thinking about Aaron with that. They're thinking about an 8-year-old.
Kind of the way Nintendo thinks about Mario games and arguably maybe even Zelda as well. Maybe
It's
just
gonna
their
be the
design
first one.
philosophy more broadly.
Yeah. So
It needs to support that first-time experience, at least, for someone who not even just their first game in that franchise, but their first game at all, like period,
yes,
their first video
which
game.
it
in
was
most
for me.
cases.
Pokemon
Yeah.
Blue was my first game I ever played, like that I owned, So I think
I know. Well, and pottery, just to interject, I mean, part of why I mentioned that is that, like I mentioned, I think back when I was playing Tears of the Kingdom, it was top of mind for me because, I don't mean that to say, like, they always have the exact same design philosophy. Quite to the contrary, like, part of what got me thinking when I was playing Tears of the Kingdom was I looked at its differences and I found myself thinking, oh, this is the first time Zelda experience for someone who is a different gamer than me and part of a different generation. So I feel like sometimes, and maybe that's an interesting point, right? In some design philosophies, sometimes like Pokemon, maybe it calls back to like old formulaic aspects in order to recapitulate that experience or make it a standard. Whereas in other games, like for the sake of keeping that experience itself fresh and recognizable as the landscape of games evolves around it over the years, they make tweaks to the point that it feels very different than older titles.
And the thing that you have to remember too is that as conscious as the Pokemon Company is that, they're going to get kind of a new crop with every game of Pokemon fans, they do really appreciate people like me who've been playing it forever. And the way that they do that is they'll do this like iterative storytelling, which I talk about in Pokemon Rose a lot, where they will they don't do reference, right? They don't do like point out and say like, you are a character who I recognize. it's always something to the tune of, okay, if you play Arceus as your first game and you get to Volo as the final boss, right?
Yeah.
You're fighting Volo, and it's really difficult, and it's like a nightmare, and you're really interested in like his motivation for trying to get Arceus's power and like all this cool stuff, right? So
Yeah.
you're enjoying that. I'm enjoying hearing Cynthia's theme with Volo, where it's like, oh, I see. Okay, so in this game that has like these antecedents for all of these characters that we know from the other Pokemon games, it's a fun little like wink and a nod. Do you get it? Do you see what we're doing here? But then it becomes something so much deeper, which is it's not just a wink and a nod. It's a thematic thing that resonates with the games that came before it and the games that will come after, where there's this really great, like you were talking about with the kind of themes of the Tales games,
Yeah.
where the more you play them, the more you realize, oh, they're doing this by referencing this character, or they're exploring this idea by making this person show up now.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and I think it's part of what's fun that we're doing stuff with Pokemon and Tales at the same time, is that it really does seem as though the way in which they think about adding dimension to the different entries in the games through intertextual support that adds richness for people who have played it without kind of gatekeeping for those who haven't.
Yeah.
At least in the way that you describe Pokemon, it strikes me as of a piece with what we've talked about quite a lot in Tales of Praxis, in terms of just their approach to that sort of cameo appearances of different characters.
Yeah, like the EX dungeons where other characters will show up, right? It's like
Right.
it's like in some games, in some Pokemon games, there will be like world tournaments where previous champions will show up,
Yeah.
to kind of hold their titles. So.
Yeah, we've talked. Well, and I don't know if that's a Tales of Praxis hot take or more of just something we've talked to death on the stream because it's come up a lot and is worth getting Dan's perspective on too. Because we talk about open versus closed worlds a ton too, but might be fun for the. Well, because I thought there was more back here that helped with the puzzle. Are you saying we're done with this part at this point? I can go back. I'm just trying to figure out how to go forward, dude. Yeah, what's your feeling now as we take stock at the end of a year and as notions of closed and open worlds continue to evolve and transmogrify and influence our favorite and least favorite games? Like, where do you stand on the nature of open world at this point?
I don't mind them, but I like when they're condensed, which I think sounds kind of, I don't know, like an oxymoron, but I like, so when
Like Final Fantasy 16.
16
That
is a
sounds-
great example, yep, where you can kind of go everywhere, but it's basically like levels or dungeons that you can go to. But then I also love, so that's typically what I prefer, right? Is like, okay, it is a huge world, but you can travel through it easily. Each area is distinct. There's something that makes you remember, like almost like an old school game with like levels.
Yeah.
We've talked about it with Dark Souls, how one of the things that I love about the contiguous world of Dark Souls is that it makes you remember things like Castlevania would. These old school games where you would just get so used to the maps, basically. So what I don't like is huge open worlds that are just big because, like, they can be. Like,
Just to pad playtime, basically.
yeah, so Final Fantasy 16 is a great example of what I like. 15 is a great example of what I hate.
Sure.
So, but then, like, I love Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild because all of it's so interesting. And I think that that is the only game I've played with that kind of scope where I've actually wanted to go around and like see everything. Because typically when I play a game like that, I just want to get to the objective or the side quest or something, and I just think it's a waste of time.
Well, and what's coming up in the chat is something that we also always talk to death, and we did a few podcast episodes on way back in the day. The OG podcast was just the idea of disambiguating terms, right? Because I think this has come up when we talked about open worlds in the stream, but yeah, like any number of things like difficulty, which has also come up in the stream, and we did an episode on, and that old bugaboo of immersiveness. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel, but I feel like my edges have softened about those terms over time, because there used to be a time when I would say and bully people about saying, like, don't even use those terms because they're so vague, like I don't know what you're talking about, and so it's not interesting to dig into that at all. Now I'm much more in the spirit of trying to encourage conversations by using those as a jumping off point, right? And saying like, well, there's something that's interesting to us about, you know, a game feeling immersive or hard or open, and it might not be exactly the same thing to different people, exactly to the point we're talking about now. So why don't we dig into some examples and structures of what we mean by that when we think about a game that's attractive or unattractive to us, and, you know, use that as a way to dig into finer points in terms of what we like and what we don't like.
Yep.
You know?
Well, I think I put the counter to you that you might be softer on it because we deliberately in those episodes tried to make it make sense.
Sure.
Right? Like, why do these terms keep coming up?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like, I don't know, I really like the open world aspect of Scarlet and Violet because, and I think a lot of people would say, oh, but it's so empty, and it's like, you know, there's not a lot going on in there. But to me, the open world part of that I love is just that the vehicle by which you get to explore, you know, Koraidon or Miraidon, is so fun to use, and it's so fun to go around and look for different Pokemon that I think that's, like, genuinely how a lot of people play that game. Like, I play it for the story because I think the story of those games is the best one that they've ever done, continuing through the DLC 100%. But I'm reminded of, I think it's a YouTuber, I think his name is Jwitz or something, I don't know if he's still around, but he was a big, like, Pokatuber, and I remember when Sword and Shield came out, he was so excited, and he did a stream or, like, a Let's Play of it, and all he did for, like, 3 hours was he walked around the same patch of grass at the beginning, like, right outside of your house, because he really wanted to get a shiny Pokemon.
Oh, that's cool.
And he put out this video because he, like, got some flack for it because people wanted to see what he thought of the game, and he was just, like, so preoccupied with that. And he put out this really wholesome video where he's just like, look, you know, that's how I decided I wanted to play it, you know. Come on, and that's kind of the fun of these games for me, is deciding, you know, what my prerogative is. So I thought that that's what I love about the openness of Scarlet and Violet, is that it really does that for people who want to play Pokemon differently in a way that I don't think the previous games have.
Sometimes I can't help
I love that.
Asbel.
Yeah, it's funny because there are some people who are, like, in game scholarship who, when they think about trying to define, like, the nature of what constitutes a game and what counts as like an instance of playing a video game, like, they point to the ways in which you have to figure out how to play by the rules and what it's expecting of you as a player in order to do anything at all. This actually comes up in Nguyen, the guy I wrote my writing sample on for philosophy programs. And it's weird because, like, you get where they're coming from in terms of wanting to define and circumscribe the game, but it leads them to have some really weird, and I would say as, like, an ordinary gamer, unintuitive commitments to doing things like ruling out that idea of playing Pokemon just standing in the same place and trying to find a shiny as an instance of playing the game, because you're, like, acting in bad faith according with the rules of, like, what it is that you're actually supposed to do in exploring the world and going through it, right? Which strikes me as just, like, deeply dissonant with kind of the culture and modes of engagement that have evolved around so many of these games. Like, even thinking about some of the challenge runs that you always do, Grail, right, of games like this. Like, no doubt that's a way of playing through the Tales game and getting a lot of unique and really interesting insights out of it beyond whatever the developers intended.
One thing that that kind of I find grating is, and this is a minor thing, I think it's just because I'm so invested in game terminology, but I don't like the term sandbox in the way that people use it, because I feel like every game is a sandbox, because it's basically like, here are the tools that are in the sandbox, and then you can either follow our rules, which is maybe the narrative or, you know, the way that the game quote unquote wants you to play it. But then, to your point with, like, challenge runs, or like Matt was telling us all about, like, it was like Iron Pokemon, Ironmon, and
Yeah,
like
Iron Man,
Nuzlocke
I
and
think,
stuff.
yeah, right.
And to me, that's like okay.
Speedrun's another great example.
Speedruns, like that's a great example of I'm going to pick the tools that you've laid out before me, and I'm going to create my own game within the world of the game. Because I think sandbox is usually used to refer to, I was going to say Minecraft Grail, or like GTA is often referred to as a sandbox, or like any of the Rockstar games, right? And I think that's true, because I feel like those are true sandbox games. But I think like you could, anything could be if you want to play it a certain way. So it just comes down to, don't tell me how to play with my toys, basically.
I also think, like, I mean, pottery, I get, and I think that there is something intuitive and important about the idea of, like, a tacit agreement between developer and player. But for me, like, I also think about it from the other side of saying, well, we want to retain, I think, like, a distinction between what it is to just, like, engage with and explore the world and the game as it's given in different and diverse ways that are supported by it, whether or not like the developers realized it was supported in that way, versus what other people do when they do things like hacks and like going into the code and like materially and substantively changing the game, right? Which is also something that people can do with games, but that strikes me as like, I would say, importantly different in terms of how the game is altered or transformed in order to engage with it, as opposed to just like exploring the artifact as given in a way that was not expected by the artist who gave it, which I think also more even-handedly extends to other forms of artistic engagement with other artistic media.
This is like, all right, this is a
we're getting there, by the way. I know we're just talking over this, but Aaron is actually using half of his brain.
I'm just trusting him. Yeah.
Things are happening.
It reminds me of so I think the book and the movie Ready Player One are kind of stupid, but there is some fun stuff in there, and I think that
can I just interrupt? That's hilarious to me, because I think before it was ever announced as a movie or anyone else had even heard of it, I feel like it was you who extolled the virtues and interesting character of it to me.
Well, I'm about to say,
okay,
yeah,
right.
it's, but I'm you have to give the caveat, because it is kind of stupid, but it's very good. Like, I didn't say it was bad.
Okay, all right.
I said it was stupid.
It can be stupid and good. That's important.
There's plenty of stupid things
I forgot
that I love.
that.
Yeah,
that's true.
But,
I forgot who I'm talking to.
One of the things that I loved in the movie, especially, because I do think at its core it's about it's about play and games, obviously.
No, Potter, you are gonna miss out. We'll miss you, buddy. But I'm glad you're able to join for what you are able to be here for.
But there's a great line at the end of the movie that I love, which I think is kind of the cornerstone of it, that Ernest Cline didn't write. I think it was a Spielberg interaction or interjection into the world, I guess. But at the end, when like the main character kind of wins and he gets control of the Oasis, the big game that everybody's playing that basically runs the world economy, he becomes like the richest person in the world.
Sure.
But he's talking to the creator of it, or this maybe AI reconstruction of the creator of it, this guy Halliday. And
wait, so is it just SAO with extra stuff?
I think SAO came after.
Oh, okay.
But it is SAO. So, but okay, here's the thing, right? So SAO, the first season ends with Kirito asking the creator, like, why did you do this? And the creator's like, I don't know. Right? This one, they get to the end of it, and when he wins and he basically gets the key to the chocolate factory, as it were.
Can I interrupt before Pottery goes? Because he just said like the most you thing, which is that it's just toxic nostalgia for the 80s and 90s.
That's why it's stupid, yeah. But the line that I think draws it all together, and which is really a cool commentary on the kind of player-developer agreement that Pottery brought up, is for all that happened in it, and for everything that went down in the game and the Easter egg hunt and all of this stuff. Halliday's last lines in the movie are, he gives like the Easter egg and the golden ticket, the key to the chocolate factory, over to Wade, the main character, and Wade says like, why did you do this? Like, are you even Halliday? Like, who am I talking to? And he just kind of takes a beat and he just says, thanks for playing my game. And he walks away, right? And it's like this really great, I think, emotional beat for what it is to play a game, not just for the player, but for the person who constructed it.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, my hope would be, like, I've seen enough YouTube videos of people speed running games and the developer watching it and being like, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
that I think it doesn't bother people that much when, like, on the whole, I don't think it bothers developers when you play it a different way. Not like it would bother, like, a D&D dungeon master when you start like meta breaking the game, because that's like you're breaking the rules. Like, I'm trying to tell a story here, whereas like a developer's like, well, that all still exists. Like, what are you doing with this thing over here? You know, I think that's a big difference.
And maybe that's one of those things where, like, I forget if we were even talking about this on the stream, but for the life of me, I have been interested in, you know, trying to figure out how to get into D&D, because I feel like so many of the interesting conversations and ways in which people think about gaming emerge from that world, and I just can't figure out how to get into it. But I think we were talking about this on the stream because I'm thinking maybe Baldur's Gate 3 is like my back door
your
into
only
it.
way into
right?
it,
Yeah.
I was gonna, so Grail, the reason I said most developers I've seen is because Nintendo is the exception that absolutely proves the
We
rule.
were talking about that with Matt because he's such a big Melee head.
Yeah, no, they hate Melee. They want it to
Right.
be dead. Yeah.
But you know, I think even there's like an interesting maybe analogy or way of like using the dungeon master as a metaphor for understanding like ontologically what happens with video games as well. Just the idea that, like, yeah, you can imagine a dungeon master getting exhausted at this like bad faith
I've
player
been in that
who's
position.
just trying to fuck with him or her. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. But I also feel like in the spirit we're talking about, like, you can imagine a fun and playful and loose and good faith group of players who like want to push the limits of the game beyond, you know, the campaign that the dungeon master was thinking of. And even if it, you know, takes it in directions that the dungeon master wasn't prepared for, and maybe they have to curtail it in the spirit of what you were saying about game designers, it might even inspire like the next campaign or a different kind of game design that they come up with after the fact, right?
You know what I think it really comes down to is like because that can be very fun, like when you're challenging the DM. But I think like what you need to realize if you're going to have a fun D&D campaign is that, and I feel like DMs forget this a lot of the time, maybe because they fall into the role of like, I'm the only one who DMs and my friends don't want to do it.
I'm a
But
spiteful god.
yes, I think that's usually every game I've ever played of D&D. Luckily, the DMs that I've played with have enjoyed it, but they've also admitted that they got into it because no one else wanted to do it.
Maybe that's why I hate it too. Maybe it's like my anti-authoritarian streak that also leads to death of the author.
Well,
like, I'm just not that interested in
here's-
dealing with the DM.
Here's how you can have a really fun game session. But it only works if the DM feels this way too. And you have to either like explicitly ask them about it or kind of wink and nod at them until they get it. It can't be that they are the author. They have to be another player. That's the only way it works. They just have a different role. Like everybody has their character. Their character is the DM, you know? And I think
It's like
that
the narrator in the Stanley Parable, that kind of
yes, yeah. But if they don't do that, or if they have that like ego, which a lot of DMs do,
thing. Yeah.
it just gets like it gets really boring. It's a good question, Grail. I don't know, like, because Sakurai doesn't seem like the kind of guy who, even now, like, I know he's kind of gotten hot about a couple of things, but I don't think it's him. I think there's some, you know what it is? It's this with every company. There's some bean counter who says if they're playing that, they're not playing the new one. Get rid of it, you know? That's all it is.
Which seems myopic in more ways than one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think about especially the smaller and critically well-received sort of more avant-garde games like this can't be the best example of this, but like DDLC off the top of my head, right? Like that wouldn't have happened if players weren't messing around with code and trying to figure out like ways to game the game, and then, you know, they came along and asked, okay, how can we tell a really scary and thoughtful story based on that
Yep.
sort of thing.
Did we do it?
Yes. But Grail's asking us to change tactics real quick.
Change up the percentage he
Yeah,
heals.
I think I can do that. Grail. I actually don't know how to do that. Yeah, Grail, I'm not sure where in the menu to change that. Oh, it's under defend, okay. Just when I was about to run ahead, foolhardy that I am. Okay, so...
So like make her
yeah.
often and make
I think I'll make Sharia often and Sophie rarely. There, that ought to change.
Cool.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's exactly what it is. I just wasn't reading the more descriptive text underneath. You know, I think we'd be really much better at interpreting the literary content of games if we could read. Yeah, that's got to be the missing link.
Yep.
All right, let's do this. Arrgh!
Big spooky trend.
The creepiest of all the trends. That's so true, Grail. Yeah, it's like, why would I have to read? I do all the writing.
Yeah. I know what this is like.
Come on, all words are the same. How many letters can they have? 25, 26?
Just reminds me of that Mitchell and Webb sketch with the like Gordon Ramsay parody. Like it's just simple ingredients cooked well by you.
You're much better at this than I am.
King Lear is just English words put together. Will you stay forever?
Much less harmful image of all the idiocy around AI writers, like, oh, put robot monkeys on the keys, and they'll come up with all of the works of art for the next 1,000 years.
It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times. Try again.
It was the age of clickbait. It was the age of Elon.
No. Big punch.
The biggest punch.
Many punches. Consecutive normal punches.
And see, like, if you picture that level of capability, especially at the beginning of the game when they're all kids and this, like, robot superhero shows up,
Yeah.
it's just so cool.
That's funny.
It's like a JRPG protagonist has wandered into your very ordinary childhood.
Okay, should we kill the other Trent? Are these spawning from it?
Yeah, but I think it's one of those usually the way the balance works in these is it can be helpful to cull them just so
Okay.
you don't have to deal with them.
So it's not a constant.
Not
influx of them.
frequently enough usually for that to be an issue,
Okay.
I think, but we can watch.
Seems alright. Yeah, I think we're fine.
We were talking about AI the other evening, Grail, and you know, I came down on a place very similar to what you just said, which is I really think, to me, when I bitch and moan about the stupidity of AI, it's in all of the kind of technobabble expectations that it will be like a purely generative replacement for everything that humans can do. I think in terms of what you're saying, when it's like an assistant and supplemental catalyst, especially for a creative writer like yourself, working through how you feel or think about characters and stuff like that, then I think it can be a tremendous step up and a really interesting and useful resource. It's just that not everyone thinks of it that way. Oh, they weren't even spawning them. They split into them when they died.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was an infamous and frustrating boss earlier in the game when you would just infinitely summon in more soldiers. So I was afraid it might be that situation, but we're good. All right, get another memory sequence, I think.
Big time, sad time.
To the Earth Pulse. Yeah, the other great thing about that boss was that all of his attack names were literally just animals, so he's just shouting at Sue the whole time.
Everyone stand strong. We can't
which is Lambda also, if that wasn't clear.
This is Lambda?
Yeah. So I should give you background. So this was the traumatic monster that the kids encountered in childhood and didn't understand what it was. Yeah, and now we've come to understand that it's a manifestation of Lambda when it's not like tethered to a human or humanoid body.
Okay.
What? Who are you? You again.
Target acquired. Initiating attack.
Why? Why won't you leave me alone? Do you hate me that much?
Nuts.
Oh, really sad. Like, Lambda doesn't know why the fight, and Sophie only has the directive of the fight with no intelligence behind it. That was Richard as a child.
Okay.
Asbel, Sophie, everyone
This was after they were attacked at the end of their childhood.
happened. Who did this to you? Looks like lifetimes. I knew Cedric would poison
His
me,
uncle.
but I didn't think it would be so soon. I don't want to die. What the?
Live on.
What?
Live on.
That's what Cornell said.
Yeah, like they're like Lambda and Sophie are sort of two sides of the same purpose-driven directive, where Lambda only has this notion that was impressed on him by Cornell of survive, and Sophie only has that notion
Destroy.
that's programmed exactly. Yeah. Interesting too because
So did sorry to cut you off.
no,
but
please cut me.
Did Sophie die there or just like reset?
So she like quasi died. Well, we ultimately learned because like she does seem to die at that moment, and that's what everyone thinks. And then after the time skip into their adulthood, she appears again at the same place
Oh.
where she initially did.
Okay.
And what Emerald eventually explains in this like really cool, very Tales twist of symbolism is that Protos Haste, that is Sophie, has the ability to basically survive by distributing its particles into other life forms. And she did that not only as a survival mechanism, but also to use her particles embedded within her friends, Asbel and Sharia and Hubert, to protect them from dying. Because it looked like, for all intents and purposes, they were dead there, and the only reason they survived was because they participated in her life force.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I wouldn't be too stoked on a purple gaseous sphere flying towards me either.
No, not as friendly as Pink Robot Girl running towards you and saying, "I'm going to protect you." The other really cool formal thing about this is that it's the kind of thing that's so small, but I love thinking through the game this time. One thing, if you think about different flourishes that occur in different games, that the other games don't really do as pointedly, although you see it a little bit near the end of Berseria, is that it shows like the thoughts of characters, right? So sometimes you'll have a thought bubble as opposed to a speech bubble in the parentheticals. So you get accustomed to that through the whole game. But still, to me, like at that point, there's something magical about how kind of unexpected it is that this monster, who's been sort of this inexplicable amorphous presence throughout the whole game, you go back to a moment in the narrative you've already seen, and it has thought bubbles you weren't privy to at the time. Like, it's such a simple way to take the representational language that the game already had, and then turn your attention to something that was outside your focus and wasn't presented to you as the player back
really
when you
cool.
first saw it, right? A cool and simple way of giving you more insight into, as you say, maybe not a villain, maybe more of just an antagonist.
It just cut off. Sophie, when did that initial battle with Lambda happen? Do you remember?
It happened when I first came to this world.
And then it appeared with us and Richard in the secret passage 7 years ago.
So that monster who attacked us back when we were still kids, that was Lambda?
It looked like he was just trying to stay alive.
Maybe all he wants is to live. Lambda is close. I feel his presence growing stronger.
It's time.
Right. Let's find him and finish this once and for all. Lambda was used and betrayed, and his life was threatened.
You're only pretending to like me, so you can use me later. It's always the same. People are only nice to me when they want something for
That's what Richard said the very first time he met Asbel.
someday. Those same people will come for me as well.
Yes. My uncle tried to poison my father, and as I expected, he did the same to me. He will curse the day he tried to take my life. I will make him pay.
So that's why Richard and Lambda came together. Both of them suffered more than anyone should, and they both want revenge. I can't blame Richard, not after all he's been through. I remember when I lost Sophie, when my father died, when I was banished from Want. What if Lambda had been there with me? What would have happened? If I wasn't lucky enough to have friends that helped me, what would have happened?
I love those reflections. Yeah, there are a lot of ancient children in this series, aren't there, Grail?
Billion-year-old children.
I don't remember perfectly. Merity is pretty old too, I think. Was someone you'll get to know pretty soon from certain game. Yeah, it's interesting too to think, because so we thought a lot about the symbolism of Sophie. It's interesting because I would push what you just said a little bit further, Grail, with this idea that, yeah, as Grail points out, when we first meet Richard after the time skip.
Sorry, my controller.
Oh no, you're okay. He's pretty weak, and it seems to be the case. Like he was suspecting as a kid, like his uncle had already started poisoning him. So I think you could almost read it as saying like the only reason he was able to survive for so long with that poison in his system was Lambda basically propping him up, which then I think feeds pretty nicely and neatly into other themes this game is concerned with in terms of just like how individuals are sculpted by and cope with the nature of suffering that's put upon them from the outside, oftentimes through reasons they don't understand, or just the abject cruelty of those around them, which is something that Grail called out much earlier in the playthrough. And so that tension between like what it is to sort of drive yourself to persist maybe in pernicious or unhealthy ways because you must in order to overcome the suffering around you, I think is a really interesting tension to see in Richard and Lambda. Ooh. Oh man, now I'm getting Mongo Earth Pulse vibes, speaking of Earth Pulse. Oh, did I go? Well, I'm sure there'll be another save point. Head to Richard. New enemies. That's how you know we're progressing.
Big spiny weirdo.
It's my favorite kind of weirdo. You thought it was Sharian. But it was I!
Just for good measure. I'm just thinking of the bridge where he throws the sink.
Perfect. No, yeah, that's what I was alluding to, Grail, when I was calling out your comments from earlier in the stream. And I think too, so I think I alluded to this back when you didn't have any context on Friday, Dan, or Monday. I don't what
Monday,
what day,
yeah.
whatever the last stream was. But especially with like what we were just talking about in terms of Sophie's death and rebirth, and her quest to regain her memories and the meaning of her life in the face of a memory of death. It's a game that's very concerned with these cycles of existence and what it is to figure out whether and how to transcend, and the suffering that sort of forces you through those cycles, and the purpose that drives you to act in a certain way within them. So I think, considering the nature of that kind of cycle of violence and suffering, oftentimes passed down through lineages, which this game is often concerned with, overlaid with sort of the more existential concerns. That's part of what I was gesticulating when I was saying, and as we will continue to see as we work forward to the conclusion, a lot of it feels preoccupied with pretty Buddhist ideas to me. Let me see if I can change the, that should hopefully make it a little easier for us to see each other. Oh, are you dead?
Yep. I got blasted. Not anymore!
Blast cannons. Oh, not the laser beams. Yeah, those are the worst.
To launch triplets of terror. You can be such a child. You're both too cool for win quotes?
I'm a triplet?
Of course.
I am not your sister, Asbel.
His deadpan face.
Yeah. Please understand. Just, it's a metaphor.
I'm trying.
Enemies.
See Grail's message.
Yeah, I'm already doing it.
No one can stand before my blade.
It's a 3-person team. We have 2 players and Coach Grail.
Coach
in the
Grail.
house. Woo woo.
Okay, let's do this.
They do hit hard.
Bring me back. Yeah.
Excellent. I have gluttony. How about that? Speaking of sin and suffering and other unfortunate metaphysics. Oh, you sure?
Pulled it off somehow.
All our media interactions are just Tim Robinson with extra steps.
That's fine by me.
Me too.
I just really think there's something bad waiting for me at home. Waiting for me at Westalia.
What's waiting for you in the Lestalia, Richard?
I don't know.
Is it really something, Richard?
Yeah, I don't know.
I just gotta survive for my zip line. He's just way too rough with the planet's core. You're not supposed to use it like that. Also, I forgot to ask the obligatory question. Are you loving having Sophie in your party after you had to deal with her in Zisteria?
Oh.
In the Calyx.
Yeah.
With Jade.
That's right. I forgot about that. She kind of... Well, I didn't know she was a robot at that point.
Yeah.
I just thought she was dull.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rude. That's when she's fully actualized as a person, too. A dull person, but still a person.
Yeah.
Oh, is this the end of this path? It's remarkably underwhelming. Oh no, is this the real puzzle? Just figuring out which of the two ways to go is correct?
Did we go this way?
I hope not, otherwise I'm gonna be even more confused. It's true, Grail loves Hubert.
I'm digging the left, the like dual blade combo. That's pretty cool. Like one shot. I'm not sure what move it is, but there's
It's
like
a
one
laser
shot.
beam, isn't it?
I guess,
Just shoots
yeah.
right through you. I think that's.
But
what
it took out like all my HP, so I'm wondering if it's like a one-shot move anyway, or if I'm just, you know.
I've been complaining the whole playthrough about Hubert specifically being a glass cannon, so I think even more
Just
so
him.
than the average character in this game is. Yeah. Got it. It does have big Northern Crater energy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when we got down the final Genova fight.
Kind of comforting in that sense, I guess, to have a foreign presence in the planetary bloodstream who seems to be capable of
kinda cool.
redemption.
Yeah.
That's true. Mal can't dodge either.
He's just too heavy.
He, like, all of his attacks require him to stay in place and basically leave himself prone.
Okay.
Because he throws his Bladerang and then just hangs out there.
I see.
Or else he's casting long-range spells. So dodging is not exactly his forte. Yeah, it was very funny because one of the optional battles you can have, which is really fun, is like a one-on-one master-student duel between him and Asbel. And it's just like, it's a single linear line for all of his attacks, so you can just step out of the way and then wail on him.
Ah, you passed my test. I'm
Solid.
terrible.
You've learned other axes of activity.
I need some new ingredients and then showtime.
Oh man, that's got to be the heart of the world over there.
It's a big blue orb.
That's right. The world within the world. You know, Grail, I thought you were a bro and you weren't going to mention that. I have no excuse. I'm sorry. Like I said, I see a lot of myself in that playing Bloodborne.
We also got exploded like 4 times from the Lambda robot. So
That's true.
when the objective was just like make it explode and guard yourself.
Be on the other side of the
Yeah.
screen. That took us 4 tries. God, I already blocked that out because it made me feel so bad. Talk about a fight you don't want to have to do more than once. Thank you, Grail. I do think there was a decent amount of jank there. Trisha!
We did it, Sophie. We did it, Sharia.
I was actually just thinking that, Grail, so let me make sure that we either have them or have the titles equipped to have.
I know I saw a different one because it wasn't what was the Fantastic Balls was the first one.
That's,
And I had like a cool
that's fine.
bow and arrow move.
Yeah. There are 3 for each character in the game, and then some even hidden ones on top of that. I don't know whether you have yours yet. Do you know where it sits for Hubert, Grail? Because I'm not sure. I just got the title equipped for Asbel's. Are we sure we've gotten it for Hubert? I can't just look at the art screen, that's true, that would be easier. Oh yeah, you have it. I think we've seen that at some point, just not with Dan. Yeah. So if we're at the over limit screen and there are 3 of the full gauges, either one of us can hit the L1. Yeah, and it'll just automatically roll into that one, which is the strongest and coolest for obvious reasons. I feel like we did see it exactly once, Grail, because I feel like I remember seeing the name Expiation and thinking, wow, that's such a cool name. Of course, I couldn't tell you when that was, but I'm not going to talk us out of seeing it again. Whoa.
There we go.
I need some new ingredients and then showtime.
I don't like the looks of this one, Dan.
There's a big, like, moth dragon.
Moth Dragon. Oh no! What's it called?
Proserpina.
Sounds like a Pokemon name.
It does.
Evolves from Proserpete.
Little tiny Proserpine. Unsilent spider Proserpine.
You know, it was one of those few moments of feeling purely powerful in the recent streams, Grail. I noticed that too. I just don't know why there has to be 2 of them.
I feel like there's been 2 of every sub-boss that we fought, except that ogre.
Oh, that's a
not
good
the not
point.
the ogre, the
Yeah.
golem.
Yeah, all of the ones on the way here. The
Yeah.
optional ones were just 1, but yeah, I think every single one of the required ones has been a
So,
combo.
Yeah. I need
It's
you
one
guys
of those
to
things that.
stop bullying me.
Why are you bullying me?
God, stop.
Where am I out there?
Nice.
Instant balls.
Instant
that's what
balls.
you're saying. He likes the up close attacks, Grail.
I do.
Makes sense though. You've never been one for Squall and his gunblade.
No.
Or I guess lightning, but that's a needless comparison
Yeah.
anyways, for so many reasons.
But also no.
Yes. Or Leon, yes, so many options.
Only when he's tired of his dumb name.
I still need to play that at some point.
I'm too hard on it, but I just
I know
don't
you are.
like it.
That's
just
one of the.
remind
We
me-
talk a lot about the virtue of recommendations. There are vices to it too, because I do know, for instance, like one of the main reasons I have not played Final Fantasy VIII over all these years was that you've been so hard on it historically. So not that I've taken it off my list, but I've deprioritized it.
Yeah. I just don't. I don't like it very much. There's things I like in it, but it just feels very messy to me, which
Messy can be interesting sometimes, though. No.
only when like I think like there's definitely interesting parts to it, but it's like the only game that I've played in recent memory that frustrated me like going through it. That I was actually like, I was talking like at the characters and being like frustrated at how it was written, and just like it just I don't like it on that level. But
That's not a fun level usually. No. I
also
feel like that's a
think
pretty rare thing for you to find in the games that you play too.
yeah, it's like there's that aspect of it, and then there's also like when I get sick of like grinding, you know it's bad.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the way that the magic system works is that you have to use this ability called draw to like get uses of magic out of things. So it's just like that also like is a way to strengthen your summons, which are like attached to you, and therefore determine your stats. And it's just like a very padded game. And then when you get like the padding on top of like the writing and the kind of, I think, sloppy storytelling, it just is like, if it was one or the other, I think I would be more lukewarm on it, but with everything included, it's just like, to me, it's just a frustrating experience.
Just strikes me as so intrinsically hard to believe when it's sandwiched between two masterpieces.
I know, well, I think, I mean, it's a lot of people's favorite, you know, I'm not going to take that away from anybody, but I just, who knows, if I played it, like, when I was that age, maybe I would feel similarly about it, but I don't know. So it's one of those ones that I kind of played a little bit of when I was a kid, and then came back to as an adult, and I think just didn't want to give it the grace that I would give to some other things.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like, I like, my brother Matt and I talk about this all the time, like, I love Leon as a character in Kingdom Hearts, and it just feels to me like Nomura was like, I gotta write this guy a little different, I think, you know, and I think that that's kind of a cool idea, but there's just a lot in it that I find grating, I guess.
Yeah. Because you've been back to it over the years since, right? You
Oh, yeah.
You can never find your way into it.
No, and there's always things that I like about it. Like there's a character in it who is really interesting, who I think is probably, like, when you get around to playing it, you'll extol, you know, this part of the game that I'm not gonna give you any more than
Sure.
that.
I'll know it when I see it.
You will,
When I extol
absolutely,
it.
yeah. And I think like that part I really like, but it's one of those things where, you know how
There's too much stuff to get to it, that kind of thing.
not even that, because it's the structure of the game gives you like a fair amount of it, but the problem I have with it is that it doesn't coalesce at the end in a way that's satisfying. So like, I think the problem that you have, or maybe not problem, but like the issues you have with Ultima in 16,
Sure.
like that's how I feel about this.
I see. Yeah, that can definitely color your experience with the game.
Yep. Where it's like, oh man, like that's such a, I wish they had done this differently, you know? And
Like that conversation we had a million times when I was rewatching Supernatural too.
yes, I wish, oh man, I
Yeah.
see the,
They didn't know what they had.
I see the Matrix here, like why did they not do it this way? And then you try to, now I'm at a point in my life where I'll have that thought, but then I'll think, well, why did they do it the other way? Like how can I interpret it that way to kind of make it interesting?
Yeah.
But I feel like every time I try to do that with this, I'm like, I guess I get what they were doing, but I just think it's stupid.
Like you want there to be more there and you just don't think there is.
Yeah.
That is frustrating. So, are you saying that is the cool thing, Grail, that Hubert can use it during a 25 plus hit combo even if it's not during Eleth Burst? Am I reading this right? Because that's pretty cool. Hey, Chrissy. Nice to see you. Welcome to the stream. We missed you. Hope Yeah, hope you had a good adventure this evening. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so if you ever see over 25 hits on the stream, you can just roll into that.
Cool.
That's very neat. Yeah, nice way of letting it breathe. Of course, Asbel doesn't have it. Be too easy. Oh, looks like we're really getting down there now. Oh my god.
Ooh.
This is very cool.
Do we share the combos? As a
Yeah,
team?
it's one gauge.
Okay, gotcha.
That's one of the things that Grail has waxed nostalgic about, is that he's played this with various people in the past, and I forget, was it your cousin or brother or someone, Grail, who had a penchant for stealing the gauge whenever Grail wanted to use it?
Classic.
Yeah, we got Excalibur restored, which was what we were working on the end of the last stream, Chrissy, and then truly since then we've just been kind of podcast vamping while working our way down to the center of the world in the Lestelia. It's been a long adventure through this dungeon. But I would say in the satisfying way that one hopes for the end of a JRPG.
Yeah, it's fun. We've leveled up quite a bit too.
Yes, which is nice to see. Oh yeah, significantly, going on, I think 10 more levels at this
Since we
point, which is
played with
great.
Matt,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that.
We were trying to save it for a level 3 Mystic Art, and the dumb idiot kept using it.
That fool! That beautiful fool!
You blew it!
There's some joke in there about Price voicing Malik and also saying as Lord Genome just what I was waiting for, but couldn't wait for it.
This guy over here
This fucking guy.
giving me big problem.
The living bows are one of Grail's least favorite enemy types.
I can see why.
Yeah. They're not great.
I can't even bear the sight.
What are my thoughts coming in so late? So I'm really, I feel like I'm just getting the vignette of Lambda, and I'm really interested in it. So that was my hope and dream for the ending here, is kind of seeing the, I guess like the motivation of Richard and Lambda through each other.
It's an interesting one to come in at the end of, because I think even in the universe of JRPGs, Tales of Graces, I think, distinctly leans into telling you the antagonist's full backstory only in like the final sequence leading up to that confrontation. We really didn't know much about Lambda before this, and so in an interesting way, yeah, you almost are getting it as, like, as you said, a vignette or even a short story, right? Like, here's a portrait of this character and what they've been
That
through.
we didn't know much
Yeah.
about before.
Yeah.
Close proximity to the Lestalia will make Richard even more powerful than before.
He wasn't exactly holding back when we fought in the cocoon, but this time he'll be fighting for his life.
As will we, brother. And therefore we shall not lose.
Exactly. We will not lose. I've spent my life trying to get stronger in order to protect my friends. Today, I fight with that power.
I fight to ensure the promise I made to Kurt.
I fight to protect Asbel and Richard and everyone. Our reasons for fighting can be different, as long as it brings us all together.
Yes. Find the thing you hold in your heart and never let it go.
Let's do this.
All right. Stay focused, everyone. Our final battle begins now.
Oh, we can turn the game audio up a little bit.
I can do that right now.
The stream is so advanced now, I have technical support.
DJ Hughes on the ones and the twos.
I was telling the, oh nice, we do have an elevator back to restock, which is apt.
There was a shop like right there, wasn't there?
Yeah, on the shuttle. Oh, and we can see the path we descended to. That's great. Oh, I love JRPG final dungeons that show you the whole path that you've taken after all of the crazy puzzle solving and navigation. It does make it feel, it's funny, I don't know whether this resonates with you, because I know you've been getting so into hiking lately, but I do feel something kind of deeply thematically consonant between the satisfaction of getting to like the peak of a hike and seeing evidence of the journey and everything you've been working towards, and a similar vibe that you get after working through sort of a mountainous equivalent of a dungeon in a game like this.
Absolutely. Everybody's happy.
There've got to be like YouTube playlists of just the sleep
The end
tones
sounds.
in
There, yeah,
every
there
JRPG.
absolutely are. You know? Or you know what you know I know you could find is like rain and traffic sounds with those interspersed every like 10 or 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet that's what you get.
I feel like coming to something like the AT from a background in JRPGs and kind of the spirit that we're talking about, Grail, might be the perfect way to do it, because
Like a
by all
pilgrimage.
well, not even just a pilgrimage, but like an especially arduous one that expects
really-
a lot of your body and
to his-
survivalism.
To his point too, I'm
Yeah.
okay. Forget the like arduousness of the hike itself. I'm terrified of the AT because of like the awful stories you hear about like oh, there's like somebody set up like a wire on this trail, or you know, they set up like a basically like a mugging spot at like a resting area, you know, because it's so
I don't
long
even
and there's
think
so
I've
many-
ever heard
Oh,
any of
man.
those horror stories, but I don't like it.
You know who I heard them from was I had a math teacher when I was in 8th grade who she did that like every year. She would do like a leg of it,
Oh wow.
and she would just tell these horror stories of like things she'd seen and like people that she had run into who had these awful things happen. And yeah, I don't know.
Jesus.
It
That's
seems
harrowing.
I know it seems like it's like we were kind of joking on the hike we went on the other day that you dropped Evie's water bowl,
Right.
and then it was just like nicely placed for us when we got
By
back.
a polite Coloradan
Somebody found it.
who wasn't trying to kill us.
Right, and I just think like for as much as there is there, I just have that like early childhood memory of my math teacher being like, "Oh, let me tell you about the horrors of the Appalachian Trail."
Well, I don't know that this has ever come up on the stream, but my dad, in his retirement, bless his heart, has gotten super into pilgrimages for whatever reason. He was never really religious, but he has hiked some of the big ones like the Camino de Santiago in Europe and the Via Francigena that terminates in Rome. But even he, like for all of those thousands of miles that he has walked in some pretty remote areas, he's
Especially the
said,
Camino.
Yeah, but he said, no, I would not do the AT. That's just
Really, I didn't know that about your dad.
it's like, because he sees it truly in the spirit we're saying, where it's like it's almost more like Survivor or those crazy
Yes, it
reality
is.
shows that you see versus a moment to be like spiritually intimate with yourself and reflect on things in the journey. It's almost like, since we're on a stream doing something like this, you might say it's like the Dark Souls of pilgrimages, but in the real sense of it, like if there's any kind of meditative insight you get, it's that specific brand of like emerging out of just nightmare,
Hell.
turn your brain off for the sake of
Yeah.
only focusing on living to see the next day. And I can
Yeah,
see why
that's-
that would not appeal.
I watched this guy on YouTube who I really like him. Like he's this like goofy Alaskan dad. His channel's called Outdoor Boys, and he's really amazing. And like he goes on these incredible like survivalist hikes in the Alaskan interior and like the wilderness and the mountains. And I love watching them because it's, first of all, it's kind of cool to see somebody who knows that much about something doing that.
Sure.
But then also it's very soothing to see like he'll just have time lapses of like making an igloo or making a shelter or something. And there's part of that appeals to me because I do love hikes, and I I've been on my own pilgrimages in Japan and stuff where I've been in danger sometimes. But the constant danger is the thing that I can't do. Like if something's, if there's a stretch that's really difficult, I can gear up for that.
Yeah.
But the AT scares me for that, where it's like everything is just kind of trying to kill you.
And just the duration too, like even if you do it piecemeal, it's just like I could do the epic adventure we love to tell the story of how we almost died on Mount Fuji in a day by hiking it and being idiots, and that was great beauty, great story, real danger.
We were fine,
but over a finite amount of time, and we were fine in the end. Exactly. Whereas just total isolation and no promise of making it out for just weeks at a time.
It is weeks.
Yeah,
that's the
at a
craziest
minimum.
thing.
Yeah.
And then you get into all of these. This is the kind of stuff I like. Like you get into Appalachia is one of the, I think, scariest places in the States because it's just like deep, vast wilderness with things that we just kind of. There's like this mystique of it where it's half real like wilderness danger and half like superstition and stories and like
Lore.
there's something about a place like that has so many like decades going on centuries of like people seeing and hearing the same things.
And as Grail says, like oldest mountain range on the planet.
On
right?
the
So
planet,
it has this kind of like mythical terror to it, right?
It's Ultima Thule.
It's vast. That's right. It's vaster than you could ever wrap your mind around.
Yeah, it's a scary. I mean, it's beautiful, but there's another guy. It's just Dan's culture corner, but there's another guy.
It's my favorite corner.
There's another guy, Wendigoon, on YouTube, who he does like horror content, but his channel is very much like he's just kind of sitting in front of a camera and he's like talking at you for a few hours. He's a great orator and he puts things together. He's very Grail, yeah. So I mean, Wendigoon's great, right? And there's that video that he did about the ghost lights of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's just this phenomenon where it's like my rational brain says that is clearly just something that we don't understand yet, right? Like that's something that can be explained scientifically, but then the lizard part of my brain is like, that's a ghost. That's real.
That lives with
that
us
lives
on
with
Earth.
us on Earth.
The lizard brain and also the horror part of your brain.
Yes,
I mean, you kind of
that
set
excites
yourself
myself
up for
in
that.
it. Yeah, there's a place around here called, I say around here, like in Colorado. I think it's part of the Rockies. It's called the Crazies. Have you heard of those?
No, never. Please prevent me from sleeping tonight.
It's just this like, it's a mountain range, but it's super jagged and just like, it's like what we were talking about with the AT, just this awful place. But I think it's called the Crazies because there was this story of settlers kind of living on the outskirts of, or on the edge of it, like the skirt of it, right?
Yeah.
And there's this folk story about like one family, they just like were heard screaming bloody murder and running off into them.
Oh my god.
And I think that's why we call them the Crazies. The Native Americans have a different name for it, but it's similar, which is really spooky.
Oh yeah, that's even spookier.
So yeah, I love hiking, but I'm careful about where I go.
Yeah. Hiking, not gambling with your life. There's a difference.
Most I'll do is hike in the dark at the wilderness park by my house. That's about it.
I think that's adequate. All right. Shall we face whatever awaits for us?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do this.
We're
Once
all-
you pass this point, there's no turning back.
We're all itemed up.
Yes.
Good.
We're as ready as we'll ever be.
Good. My controller's on. We're good to go.
That's all about. I think we've straightened.
Is that the Lastalia?
Me too, Chrissy. I love it's the last chance. You're about to face some real crazy stuff.
Asbel, I'm warning you. For the last time, don't interfere.
All right, this can be our stretch goal, trying to kill him with a
Don't do this,
tier 3
Richard.
mystic card.
Don't you understand what Lambda's trying to do?
Yes, of course.
your ideal world? And what price will you pay to attain it?
Once we join forces with the world, we shall eliminate the source of all selfishness and pain. And that source is humanity. Humans are sad, unthinking creatures who fight and kill to appease their endless desires. The very existence of humanity is the worst crime of all. Wouldn't you agree?
Eliminate pain by destroying humanity? But what happens after that? What do you plan on doing once you're all alone? You're wrong, Richard. This is not the way to eliminate pain. You helped me recover when I was banished from my home. And I was so happy to have a friend like you. Richard, don't do this. You have kindness. And that's enough to bring peace to this world.
That's enough! His energy is incredible. Is this the force of the Eleth?
Do you understand how powerful we have become? Or would you like me to attempt to explain it to you? My dear Asbel, unfortunately, it is impossible for you to stop us now. Because the inevitable truth is you're about to die by our hand.
He will survive!
Chris, here you saying that the true source of all suffering is like lemurs or something?
Tables.
Table. That is an interesting thought, though. Like, especially since Richard is human, the like egotism of like we're the problem. Surely there's other things going on. I'm being kind of glib, but that is kind of an interesting idea for JRPGs, like with villains that are so obsessed with humanity being like a disease. It's like, look, yeah, we're things aren't going well with humans, but come on.
Ron, there's also something I think especially interesting in the Tales of Grace's idea of this presence that is so foreign and so non-human, that is so like warped and contorted by humanity that like in a seen in a certain light, anthropocentrism kind of even like corrupts and taints the view of Lambda.
Of like something that is so far from being
Right.
human.
Yeah. Limits its perspective on existence.
Like you made me have to care about you,
Right.
because of what you did to
Yeah,
me.
you molded me in your image, and your image is awful.
Yeah, I don't want any part of this.
Right.
I'm gonna hold up on the
Sophie.
Sophie. I guess that's
You monster.
that's in line with what
That's
the
true.
thing is.
That was deeply consonant.
I can't wait for this to be over after the first phase.
Oh yeah. Do you have a vivid memory in your head of the first time that happened to you as a kid when you were gaming?
Yeah, Sephiroth.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
It's on me. I should have asked a harder question.
that was the first time I got to. Yeah, because like I guess like maybe. Like I'm sure there was a boss in like a Crash Bandicoot game
It was the first one to
or
release
something,
that one,
but yeah, Sephiroth for sure. Where I was like, oh man, I'm never gonna get out of this. You know?
Yeah. That's an interesting idea, though. I don't remember the first time I felt really locked in that sense, which is also such a distinctive feeling. I was thinking Mythos, because for me, that first story JRPG, everything game like that was Symphonia. But I think, because I know the feeling you're talking about, and for me it was almost that opposite feeling of, you know, Mythos's like second phase. It is so much richer, meaning if you make the effort to do like the optional fights that
Yeah.
represent different parts of himself, and so I really felt like I was being treated to something special because of the effort that I made. I'm a little worried about the party.
We're fine. We're fine.
Put a pin in that too, Grail, because I have some thoughts about that. Actually, I guess we can just talk about it while we're finishing this fight. So, something that... Awesome, we had an Eleth burst and Asbel died promptly.
Mere seconds before rejuvenation.
That just the way it is. Oh, please, not another Mystic Art. Brother. Why? At least it was against Sophie. That was very on brand. Yeah, what I was saying was so that like the tagline of the main theme for this game is I wish that two hearts could be one. And so there's a lot in it about sort of, like we were talking about before, the contours of different relationships and the different contexts that like different bonds in our life create for us, and even different relationships internal to ourselves with like different titles describing different aspects of ourselves in a mechanical way, but also in like the symbolic way. And I think it's interesting, especially in a design language like the JRPG, where these games are so oftentimes concerned with solipsism in one way or another, to have that represented through this bond between Richard and Lambda, where they've become solipsistic exactly by trying to erase all distinctions between the ways in which they see the world. Where Lambda and Richard are like, my will is the other's will. Like, there is no us, there is only me.
Well, and from a more, not pedestrian, but from like a more like real life example, it's like you've got like a healthy relationship with the party, and then you have this toxic like codependence with Richard and Lambda.
Yeah.
And just kind of shooting that out into the world because they both think like, well, this is what has to be done, right?
And something that's also kind of real life and relatable and not JRPG metaphysical too, because like another way in which this manifests in the game, I think, is that before the party becomes actualized to the degree that we see now, oftentimes, like happens with so many of us, they have unhealthy relationships exactly because they've boxed someone else in their life into just like the particular model they had of the role they played at some point in their life, like Asbel with his dad. It's a great example, but you can do it with so many of them, right? And so there's something kind of solipsistic in that too, right? Of saying like, there is no other in the world beyond just like my particular fixed understanding of them in terms of how they colored a particular episode in my life or something
you were
like that.
you were this character for me at this point. That's who you always are, yeah.
Right. So figuring out how to grow beyond that and out of that kind of solipsism, I think, is like deeply relatable in a very real world sense. Well, we did it, Dan. We beat the game.
Nice.
It's a short ending, but good fight.
Yeah.
Oh!
Wait a minute. Are you all?
I don't believe it. Impossible. How could we have lost? This can't be.
Lambda, please, you've got to listen to me. You must let
There's
Richard
an interesting
go.
parallelism between the solipsism we were talking about and then the use of the we as the royal we, as the king, too.
It may be they can no longer be separated.
I don't believe it.
Asbel, I knew somehow you would stop me. I didn't want to trust anyone. I didn't want to be betrayed again.
But
It's better that everyone die rather than suffer any longer. I thought I wanted to kill everyone, but then I just wanted someone to help me, to understand me. Pathetic, isn't it? As we fought, I
you to save me. I never wanted to fight you. I wouldn't abandon you, no matter what. You are my friend.
So,
Sakuraba killing it with the song too.
even after all of this,
Soup opera tales
you
kill.
can call me your friend. Thank you, Asbel. I wish I could have seen it sooner. I wish everything would have turned out differently. But it's too late now. It's all far too late. Nothing more can be done now. My feelings are mixed with Lambda's feelings. And now, I can no longer tell them apart. I can't stop myself. I fear I'm going to kill you all. But please, before Lambda recovers, you have to kill me first.
Richard, don't give up!
That will not happen.
Wait a minute. Was that Lambda?
Hurry, Asbel. I'll try to hold him off. But I told you, you must kill me. Hurry.
Richard!
Lambda. It all ends right here. I won't allow us to repeat these mistakes.
Are you prepared to end along with me? Will you truly forfeit your right to exist? Impossible. Why would you ever sacrifice yourself for those who have made us suffer? If you desire death so much, then go to him yourself! I have no use for someone who lacks the will to live!
Richard!
What are you doing? Asbel!
Cool. That's a nice mirror to Berseria also, isn't it?
Lambda.
I was thinking the same thing, Chrissy. I was really interested that Lambda called it him.
Yeah.
Is that Lambda?
He has rejected Richard's body and fused with the Eleth from the Balconus.
I'm just glad our fancy lad is back.
It took long enough.
If we defeat it,
70 hours or
it
so.
will all be over.
Oh, my
It will all be over. If you destroy me, what will you fight next?
Even now, his lines are
Without
parenthetical,
a clear
as if
opponent,
a thought.
will you invent one for yourself? Humans are constantly slaughtering each other in the name of their own existence. You kill innocent people in your petty wars, then claim they were evil to begin with. You're nothing but children, driven by your own sense of entitlement.
In a game where you literally start out as
And
children.
now you will pay for these crimes with your lives!
Actually, in pretty good shape. So,
I was going to ask something. But then,
well, here, I have something to say, so I'll give you a minute to find yours before we jump back in, because there is so much to dissect here. Obviously, it's a final confrontation, amazing, everything like that. I think that... Oh no, it's contagious. Oh, you passed it to me. No, I forgot. No, I was gonna... So I think there's something interesting. We didn't really talk about this with Richard, but his is a very unusual kind of character for these games too, because you meet him in childhood, and he joins the party. And when you go through the time skip, he's one of the first characters you meet who actually joins the team and is a fully playable character for all intents and purposes. And then he just vanishes and drops out and becomes villainous. And so it's a pretty unusual case, I would say, of a character who spans the full gamut from party member to NPC to villain at the end. And I think in that sense his is an interesting relationship. And as much as we joke like soap opera tales, right, that moment when he's talking with Asbel is really touching to me, because I think like what Asbel is able to do with him is the exact opposite of what we were talking about in terms of the solipsism of Richard and Lambda, where he's able to understand like the various contours of his relationship with Richard as they have unfolded across time, and even that act of fighting him and treating him as an enemy there is an elaboration of their relationship in a way that is healthier and more honest than what it is that Richard is trying to do. Did you get yours back?
No.
I'm sure it'll come back. Ooh, how's that?
Oh. Cool.
Lambda Angelus. Oh man, now that we have the Northern Crater in our heads, that really does remind me of Sephiroth in a way that I never thought about the first time we played it. Almost to the point where I wonder whether it's like a form of critique, especially where, like we were saying, Lambda is so similar yet deeply different from something like Genova.
That's a very cool.
Life's Cry. I
That's a
love
very
that.
cool name for the song. On the rock.
Oh shit, I missed that. Yeah, I think I told you this before. We talked about it on the stream after I got all those soundtracks. Like, Sakuraba knows how to write songs and he knows how to name them. They all have such cool and telling and illuminating names in terms of what the games are thinking about. Petrified is your signature move.
I know, it's it's killing me.
Well, we have 2 healers, so hopefully we'll be alright.
Yeah, it's not lasting too long.
Press L1! Press L1 for victory!
Crying, yes. That's awesome.
Pretty sweet. I contend we saw that once before, Grail, but I'm not going to die on Mont Hill over it. Yeah, that was like an angelic demon embrace, that one. Crazy moves. Oh, I don't like that he's an over limit. Oh, thank God. Oh. Momentary safety. Oh, you're dead.
I'm dead.
Jesus. I'm trusting the healers, though. Press L1, you can do your mystic. Oh, you missed it.
Damn. Was that with the combo?
Yeah, I think I was
Here we
right.
go. Oh, let me. It's L1, right?
Yeah.
once per battle. Well, that makes sense.
Oh, that's
Otherwise, that would
fair.
be pretty unreal.
I'm not happy about it, but I respect it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's a callback to Tales of Eternia.
Oh, really?
Or in your case, foreshadowing. Very iconic and plot key attack.
Okay. Listen, Lambda, I sympathize with you. I empathize with you. Stop grabbing me.
Jesus Christ, Graylin. You write one 40,000 word article about two swords and suddenly you become a meme. Just doing what any red-blooded Tales fan would do. It could be happening. Oh, and both our healers are dead.
Uh-oh.
All my friends are dead.
That's not great.
Oh, I want Grail. This seems like the kind of thing you would know. Does Sophie have to be in this fight? Because that strikes me as something that the Tale series would absolutely do, and it would be, I guess, equally interesting to me if she did or didn't, depending on what they were doing with it. Oh, I can be attacking you to save you. If only Grail had said that a moment sooner. Oh, you are an awesome friend, Chrissy. That's a great gift. Reminds me of the year Dan got me the Majora's Mask pendant, which I still wear at Christmas.
Good.
You can be anyone. Yeah, so that's neat. It's like, at this point, Sophie has kind of overcome the totality of her purpose of killing Lambda.
You have angered me. You'll regret this.
Be honest, Lambda, you really miffed me.
Die in agony. Yeah, that's a great line. Grail and I contend, and I think as you play more of the games, Dan, you'll agree with this, that Tales' final bosses, antagonists, whatever you want to call them, are some of the most consistently quotable characters in any medium. All of their lines are so great and so distinct. Lambda, please. Disaster Flash. That's an accurate name for that. We're so close to Come on, healers. Oh my god, what?
Well, that's not great.
Oh my god, I don't like it. I don't like it. What world?
Sorry about that.
Oh, our last life bottle too. How close is he? 10k. That's when I died to the Dark Turtles.
Oh no.
I don't think we have anything that can revive us besides these girls. Slow! Oh, that really bumps me out.
Seen this.
Can we just retry this fight?
Yeah. But I don't feel good about it, Dan. Retry it, but I don't like it. Alright, yeah, let's just run it back. I'll try to be more judicious this time. That does, it retains our items, right? Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, good. I remember having to fight him quite a few times back in the day, Grail. It is all coming back to me. So that at least remains consistent.
What does he actually say?
Instant
It's
vaults.
instant balls, I think.
Vaults.
Oh, he
It's
adds
German.
he adds little flair to it. Instant balls.
Flare.
Little flair to it.
Germans, better known as the Flareons.
I mean, oh, you are preaching to the choir, Chrissy. I look at physical copies of it on eBay almost every day, and it makes me upset.
How much is it?
So we both hate scalpers, right?
Yes.
So the Switch version is around 200 or 300. The PS4 version is, if you're lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
The cheapest one I've seen is 700 for only the game, none of the bells and whistles.
Well, here's what we do. First we take it to Lambda, then we take it to the Scalpers.
Yes.
Cool. That was pretty sweet. That was our one free heal. Or revival. Curse you wasting your second chance.
He kept hugging me.
The ultimate bear hug. You and I are the same. All differences shall be erased. To quote someone else who shall not be named. And we can't even do something really cool to counter it. These final bosses definitely hit different, Grail. At least it's an appropriately fantastic final boss theme that we can enjoy again and again. Ugh. Just awful. He puts too much pressure on me, Grail. I've gotten better about that in normal battles. This is not a normal battle. I waited. Are you happy? Oh, you're petrified.
No, great. I couldn't see.
Alright. At least he was willing to just stand at you and taunt you as opposed to going after our healers.
I'll defer to Aaron on that one, Chrissy, but I played Tales of Arise first, and it got me really excited about it.
I said this on the podcast. I think, you know, hardcore Tales fans, myself included, will say there's a lot that's non-standard about Arise, but I think many of the ways in which diehard fans complain or remark about it being non-standard also makes it proportionately more accessible and familiar if you're used to just the modern design language of JRPGs and action RPGs and stuff like that, which I think for a lot of player types lowers the barrier to entry. So yeah, I would say if you want like an easy point of access that doesn't feel like you have to become as deeply acquainted as we are with something that is an entity unto itself, I think you could do much worse than Arise.
You think you have won?
Yeah?
No.
Oh.
You are mistaken. I cannot be defeated.
Love it. Heart of Graces.
Cool. I think it actually makes sense, kind of like what I was talking about with Scarlet and Violet. Like, it's a good entry point if you want to get hyped about it, you know?
Yep.
Is it all over?
Look at that! The lost Talia is absorbing all the Eleth. The lost Talia will soon return to its former state. And then in time, the Valkanists will also regain their Eleth.
That's pretty cool, bro.
So the world will be back to normal.
Lambda's completely fading away. So if he doesn't have energy to leech, will he just like disappear?
Sophie?
No, he won't. If we do nothing more, he will fall into sleep and someday he will regain his power. No. Oh, we've come so far. There's gotta be something we can do.
Sophie? Sophie, wait. Don't sacrifice yourself for this.
Thank you. Thank you, my friends. Being with you has made me happier than you know. But now, I want to protect your home. I want to protect your future. And you.
No, don't! You promised you wouldn't do this!
Even if I disappear, a little part of me will still remain inside all of you. But that is no different than you dying. It will be like the time I distributed my particles to save your lives. Except this time, I won't ever see you again. But in a way, we will still be together.
So Sophie ultimately made explicit the same metaphor we were using to interpret her particle distribution back when that happened, which is another very Tales thing.
No! Don't! Don't do this! I told you, I won't let you die!
Asbel!
Stay back!
What do we do? Asbel, please!
Don't do this! It's okay. I won't let him absorb me. I'm going to find out if all he wants is to live.
Asbel, no!
Where am I?
We are in a shared mind space. It is a neutral place that belongs to neither you nor I.
And now he's actually speaking. It's not
That voice.
parenthetical.
Lambda.
I will expel you from this place and seize control of your mind space.
Oh, this is really resonant with Dawn of the New World too.
Your
I've
body
forgotten that.
will come under my full and complete control. In exchange for becoming my vessel, I will permit you a place in my mind so that you might witness the birth of this new world. This process will allow the world to become whole again. This process will make me complete.
Complete?
Never again will anyone be permitted to cause me pain. I have been pursued for my entire life, and this process will grant me peace. I will finally be able to rest.
Seen in a certain light, it's also kind of the opposite of Tales of Symphonia, you know? They're trying to keep the world the same,
Yeah,
whereas the
right.
antagonist is trying to transform and complete it, as he
You
says.
must stay still.
Is he? Has he been taken over?
I don't know. We've been hearing two voices for a while now. One of them is definitely Asbel, but the other one is probably...
Lambda.
I think that Sophie allows us to hear them somehow.
Curses. He is probably trying to take over Asbel's mind. I hate to admit it, but Lambda responded most strongly to my feelings of anger and resentment. I thought that meant we understood each other, that we could help each other. But in the end, our mutual feelings caused far more harm than good. However, in Asbel's case,
Asbel.
So those visions we saw were your memories, right?
Did you enjoy watching my painful past? Was it satisfying to see your enemy suffer?
I took no satisfaction in seeing your pain. I'm not like that. I know that. Your past was filled with terrible things. But that's no reason for you to do this. That's why.
You overcame your pain, so I should be able to overcome mine. Is that what you're trying to say? Human beings are cruel and greedy creatures, but above all, arrogant. You pretend to care for those who suffer, while in fact looking down upon them. Do not try to sway me, human. I know your thoughts better than even you do.
It's true I don't know my own thoughts very well, but to be honest, you're doing an even worse job than me this time. I didn't say anything about you overcoming your pain alone, did I? Some things require the help of others. So if we join forces and work together, we can accomplish anything. I truly believe that.
Work together? Really? Only foolish humans fall for such pathetic words.
You're right, you know. It's true. Human beings can be pathetic. And me? Well, I'm about as human as they come. But we're more than that. We can be so much more than that. And you know it's true. Misunderstandings led to tragedy. And that in turn led to even greater tragedies. Is continuing with that cycle what you want to do with your life? Behind all the tragedy lies your sadness. And the actions that you took because of that sadness only made you even more alone. Cornell wanted more for you. He didn't bring you up just to make you suffer.
Cornell told me to live, even though I'm not human, and even though I can't maintain a human form.
I'm just one person. I can't tell you what it means to live. However, I do know this. Cornell wanted more than anything to show you as much of the world as he could. He wanted you to learn, and he wanted you to live. I know you've learned nothing but pain and sadness so far, and I'm sorry. But there's so much more the world has to offer. That's the world Cornell wanted you to see. I know that's what he wanted for you.
The world he wanted me to see.
Come on, Lambda. Let's you and I go see what the world has to offer. We can be as one, and you can see the world through my eyes.
I would consume you. In time, your space would fade and disappear.
You won't consume me.
It is inevitable. No human can resist me.
I'll take that chance. We'll see if I get taken over or not. You can add that to your list of things to observe.
How can you make such an offer? You could destroy me and end your troubles. So then why?
We can't destroy you without destroying Sophie as well. And besides, I have something to prove. I want you to know that humans have potential. I'll help you to understand how terrible it would be to end this world. It's not worth it. You still have so much left to learn. Now, take my hand.
And if I refuse?
Then, I guess I'll take your hand.
But that would leave me with
Doesn't matter
one.
who reaches out. the other accepts.
So you really intend to coexist with me? The moment you lapse, and your guard goes down, I will absorb all that it means to be you.
Well, in that case, then I guess my guard would just have to stay up.
Very well. Then from this point forward, it will have to be a battle between the two of us.
All right. If you insist. I'm ready whenever you are.
I think I've talked for too long. Or perhaps I've finally reached my limit. Asbel, I think I'm going to sleep for a while.
Lambda. Oh no, his light is fading. No, wait! You can't just disappear! Don't go, Lambda! There are still so many amazing things left for you to do! Do you hear me? You can't just end it like this! Not when you're so close! You have to see! I have to make you see! Lambda! You must live on!
Huh? The voice has stopped.
Is Lambda gone? My friend, come on.
Asbel, wake up!
Oh.
Asbel. All right! Oh, thank goodness.
Asbel.
Yeah.
Asbel, are you all right? We heard you talking to Lambda. So is he gone or what?
Sophie, what are you doing?
I'm going to blow you up.
I've been very clear.
Something's different. This reaction is new. So then does that mean he's gone? I don't know, Sharia. I don't think so. I can't destroy this Lambda. This Lambda doesn't need to be destroyed.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Lambda said he was going to sleep. He's just asleep for a little while.
So, that means Sophie doesn't have to sacrifice herself anymore, right?
Right. All right, guys. Let's go home. Time for us to go. Right.
What the hell, man? Our family's vacation together.
I'll shoot your eye out.
Your Highness!
Sharia, what are you doing here?
I was heading to Fendel when I heard you arrived. Here, let me heal your wounds, okay?
I'll be all right. Please, just go and help the others.
Yes, Richard. Just hold still. I'll fix you right up, okay?
This is all my doing. I must make amends. I can't stand still. Not any longer. Not when there is so much left to be done. All right. Spread out, men. We must secure the area. Yes, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Come on, Pascal. It's time. You haven't left this place in over a week. Yeah, I guess this is the only way. We just can't seem to raise this Falconess's output no matter what we do. So the Eleth is as difficult to extract as you thought? Looks like we can't go any higher without risking an explosion. I thought I could use the steam from hot water to power the machinery, but it didn't work out. We can't produce enough steam to make the thing function like I wanted it to. Oh, hey, Fourier! Researching the Valkanus again, I see.
That's Pascal's sister if it didn't come up.
Pascal, how long has it been since you've had a bath? I don't know. A week or something? Pascal, that's gross! What did I do? You are a girl, for crying out loud. You're supposed to bathe. And even if you weren't a girl, going a week without a bath is just disgusting. I guess I kind of get caught up in my work. I'll shower soon, I promise. No. Why do you hate to bathe so much? I don't really hate it. There's just never any hot water left when I think of it. So, if there was always hot water around, you'd bathe more often? Always hot water around? You're a genius! Oh my gosh, Fourier! That's it! We can set this up so people can bathe in the water boiled by the Valkanus! No, wait! We can let them use it for heat and for boiling their water! So, if there were pipes running to their houses and stuff... Okay, that should do for a rough draft. Now I just have to build the thing!
This is the story of how one smelly girl catalyzed the Industrial Revolution.
To take a bath until this is
With like a Simon Says board.
Oh, you saw this in the final dungeon already. Colored block puzzles make this world
That's the
go round.
technology, yeah.
That's its basic unit of knowledge.
I don't know, Pascal. I think I'd turn myself in if I were you. You're not getting away from me this time! Get back here before I toss you into the kettle!
I'm going to open a coffee shop.
Well done in there, Captain Malik.
Thanks,
And
you.
then I'll send everyone
No,
underground.
thanks belong to you. That was a very productive meeting.
Well, since I'm Fendel's new ambassador, I'm only doing my job.
must say, Pascal's idea really threw me for a loop there. Pumping warm water to all of Fendel's homes and using it for heat. It's so simple, and yet so elegant. I'm sure it will serve the people well. You'll be overseeing the entire project, correct?
Yeah, it'll be pretty dangerous work. Fendel is now a freer, happier country than I could ever have imagined. We still have many challenges ahead of us, but there's no doubt that things are improving every day.
Captain Malik, I think we're seeing the dawn of a new age.
Not to be confused with a new
Dawn
world,
of the New
just
World.
a new age.
Yeah.
You're late, Asbel.
Fine, I'm leaving then. You're gonna be mean about
Sorry
it.
that, Sophie. I couldn't get away.
Let's look at the sun.
Like that. I'm not that late.
Look down. On the ground.
Look down. Oh,
Be careful. Don't step on them.
oh, come on. You've got a ton of these. One little flower won't.
Don't.
Sorry.
From most enlightened Asbel to least enlightened Asbel.
What was the name? Was it Melkor
Yeah,
in
you're right.
Berseria?
Melchior.
Melchior.
Sorry about
Yeah, that's right.
I'll be more careful.
Don't step on those flowers! I'm doing something!
So, how's the Blossom Gale coming along?
They're almost ready. The Sopharias have been glowing for a while now.
So it's time? You know, you really did a great job with this garden. There isn't a spare inch of dirt left.
The flowers would later
Don't
die
wanna
by being
just
restricted by
plant
the lack of
here,
dirt.
Asbel. I want to plant in lots of places.
Oh, hey, hold on. At that rate, the world will be nothing but Sopharias.
Flower after which she's named, you will recall.
It's kind of silly, but I dreamt I was riding in a huge blossom gale, and we went to a beautiful meadow where I fell asleep. But then when I woke up, I was an adult. I wasn't a child anymore.
You woke up an adult?
Well, they do dream of electric sheep.
Got him.
I wonder if I'll ever grow up.
Yeah, I think you will. But hey, what do you guys think? Sopharias?
What do we get in anime?
Oh, the Sopharias are. The lights are fading.
No way! Don't give up. Come on.
Hey, look! It's happening! How pretty.
Yeah, it sure is.
I wonder where they'll end up. What do you think, Asbel?
Who knows? Maybe they'll fly all across the world.
All across the world?
Very cool.
And a whole other act. And many side quests yet to go.
Oh, the F part?
The F part, future arc. What did you think?
Pretty cool.
With your window into it.
I like it a lot. I'm gonna have to digest a little bit, but I love the ending.
I love it too, and I'll give you some of my thoughts as we're digesting, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about as we continue on with the rest and all of the different wonderful adventures we have left in this particular one. Gotta love this this reimagined version of the main theme. Also, I love the ending for so many reasons, and it was part of what I remember made me fall in love with the game the first time I played it. But coming back to it now, it's amazing because I think even though I didn't really fully process it at the time, part of what made Graces in particular stand out to me, even amongst the Tales games, is that I think even just condensed into that final interaction, I think it says so much about the game and the way in which it's different from the other games, and what it wants you to consider in ways that really are pretty progressive for a JRPG's form, I think. Like, how many JRPGs or games can you think of where after, the epic nth form of the final boss, it ends with just this conversation and that kind of confrontation where you're really coming to understand and know an enemy who has largely been absent for the totality of the game, and actually talking them into understanding things in a different way. Right? I think it ties in a really nice contrastive way, I would say, to Final Fantasy VII in the way that we were talking about. Where, like, imagine if at the end of something like that, the gang was able to have a conversation with Jenova and come to understand it, as opposed to just confronting all of its manifestations through Sephiroth and everything else, right? So that really struck me as special and an interesting, like, gameplay-centric representation of what I really love about the Tales games in general. This idea that they're just as much about those conversations and character relationships as they are about changing the world or fighting a big bad or anything like that, and more so than other JRPGs too, I would say. And then I think just in terms of the nature of that conversation and the kind of stuff that it's thinking about, like, we picked up on, even just in that last scene, like from the conversation at the Listelia onward, this idea of, oh, is Lambda talking right now? Is Lambda thinking? Can the characters hear Lambda? And I think that's a really interesting extension of, like we were talking about, just the way in which that internal monologue is layered through the game, which then I had completely forgotten this, but I think for me it comes to a head as this really interesting, and again, you would know more about this than I, but it strikes me as a very Buddhist extension to what we've been thinking about throughout the playthrough in terms of people sort of tethering themselves in these material ways to different descriptions of their identity according to different titles or roles that they can play in the real world. And then when Lambda and Asbel have that exchange that extends that sort of title-based thinking even to their own thoughts, with Lambda saying, I understand my thoughts better than you do, and Asbel, in this, I feel like, a very enlightened way at that point in the story, says, I grant, like, I oftentimes don't feel like I have a good handle on my thoughts, right? There are these things that happen to me and that I work through and are, different aspects of my life and lived experience, but they don't inhere to my identity or my nature, and I don't have to cling to them as a way of remaining tethered to the world or a particular kind of safety, whereas we see Lambda doing nothing but clinging to others, to the false firmament of these sorts of emotional barriers it's created, or its schema for understanding the world and its place in it, right? And then to crescendo that into something that even goes beyond what I was saying with Richard, like moving from a party member to a villain, to Asbel basically offering something that, again, to me now feels very meta-narrative and structuralist in a super cool, understated way, where the game's not pointing it out to you in the way that something like, a Bioshock or a Stanley Parable would, but he basically says to Lambda, let me be your avatar throughout the world. Let me take on, your perspective, and you can take on mine, and I'm going to go through the world with you, and I'm going to show you everything that there is to see. Not unlike what we've been doing with Asbel and the rest of the party for the last 60 hours, right? Put a pin in that.
Once there was a young boy who discovered a lost seed. He planted it in his yard, and he took care of it every day. time, the lost seed grew up and blossomed into a beautiful flower. What do you think happened to the seed after that? It turned into a bright, shining star that watched over everyone. This was its way of thanking the boy who had been so very kind to it. Which star was it? Well, it's the one we all know best. Our favorite star of all.
Which is also a great homage to naming the tree after Mythos and Vesperia as the brightest star in the night sky, and Brave Vesperia, which is also the namesake of the gang's guild. But yeah, so I think just to tie that thought off, I think there's something so special, especially in a genre like the JRPG, that is oftentimes so concerned with giving you portraits of characters, like we've talked about, to the point that some people, draw the, I would say, silly conclusions. I know you would say that they're basically just anime with extra steps and the interactivity doesn't matter because you're basically just watching a movie. And to turn that on its head and, I think, make narrative meaning out of this idea that what's special about relationships can actually be understood through the player-avatar relationship, that one perspective can carry the other without thereby reducing to a single entity, right? You were talking about lenses through which all of the metaphysical craziness that Lambda is doing can be brought back down to earth and relatable, and I think especially as we're seeing it in the symbolic landscape of what this game is thinking about, this idea that there's a sense in which, if we think about fully formed and cultivated relationships between individuals, we can kind of all act as each other's avatars, right? Simply by giving each other perspectives through which we can see the world differently and navigate things in ways that can help us to formulate our identity, or even just formulate different roles for us to step into and out of as we're working through these different networks of relationships. And that just that kind of act of service, providing a conduit to someone else's perspective, like Asbel does with Lambda, can be enough to invite them into a network of individuals and out of that solipsism that actually changes the nature of Lambda, like Sophie observes and says, this kind of thing that Lambda is now, that has this connection, it's not a threat to anyone because it's actually been integrated with the very people that it so feared and withdrew from.
Right.
Yeah, I it'll on the stream, Grail, I'm fond of saying this. I have such a hard time picking favorites in anything, and in the Tales series, it just feels, for a lot of reasons, unfair to do so. But I did also, I found myself thinking pretty vividly during that end scene, it's not just that this game is different, it's that it's different in ways that are really emotionally resonant. And it even talk about different aspects of localization and voice acting. Grail, I'm sure you can shout out the voice actor who voiced Asbel and Law. I'm blanking on his name, but I don't, maybe I'm projecting, but you can tell me if you felt this way too. Especially hearing the contrast between Asbel at the start of the game and the end of the game. But I think even Asbel in the earlier streams that we played versus Asbel in that final scene, he seems to be so much more grounded, so much more aware, and so much more willing to help others rather than just wrestle with his own relationships. And I think that kind of progression towards an enlightened way of being in the world that actually helps and empowers others beyond just making sense of one's own individual identity in it. I think that's a really powerful message that we can easily triangulate and pinpoint in Tales space based on all of the other games like we've been doing throughout this stream and the other ones, but which also I think kind of, seen in a certain light, transcends and stands on its own in a way that is slightly different than the language of so many of the other games. Even if we're going to say that someone like Artorias is not a villain in the pure evil sense of the word, right? I think there's something about just the essence of Lambda that is even more redemptive than someone like Artorias, I think, in a way that gives its ending a special kind of consummation and satisfaction. Yeah, Bryce Pappenbrook, thank you, Grail. Yeah, amazing performance, I would say. What do you think? Do you have any first impressions or thoughts or things you want to linger on?
I'll be honest, I'm Very tired.
That's fair. A JRPG ending can really take it out of someone, it
Yeah,
turns out.
so I don't. If I try to formulate thoughts, it's going to come out as gobbledygook. So, but I enjoyed the ending, and I really liked the voice actor for Lambda.
Yeah.
I thought that was great, and no, I'll have to chew on. I don't want to give my Buddhist take without having played the rest of it, because I don't really see it, but I don't have the context, so I don't want to give like my definitive stamp one way or the other. But I want to see what. I feel like I want to see what the F part is, because I feel like that'll be like a fun like beginning to see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get like the full brunt of it when I go into it. So.
And medias res to the nth degree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll definitely be interested as you do play through it, what you think from the East Asian Studies perspective, because obviously you know that world way better than I do. Keith Silverstone. There you go.
Has he done? Grail, do you know? Has he done like other Tales stuff? Is he? Because I know I've heard that.
His
voice
was a
before.
familiar voice to me too. He sounded almost a little bit like the guy who voices the Anti-Spiral, but I don't
Same
know that
kind
it was
of
him.
same kind of cadence.
Same intonation. Yeah.
But there's something like the Anti-Spiral is more
like an announcer voice, kind of.
like I was gonna say softer, because he like the this voice was he like lingered on certain. This is like the voice acting part of it, but he lingered on certain things, like when he said the word like suffer, he would say it like suffer, like that. Like there was a kind of a growl in his voice. So
There you go. The famed performance as titles. That's funny.
I'll have to look him up, because
it is such a special kind of role, though, because like that voice acting, at least to the best of my recollection, and it truly only appears in those last few moments of the game that you saw. So it's that presence that is looming over the entirety of the game. But then
I wonder if he did the like the little baby robot too, if he was that voice for Lambda too.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, he's one of the villains from Persona. That's probably where you know him from then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because having that kind of voice that just speaks up in that special kind of like dialectic of a final confrontation. That's the word for it. It's a dialectic. I think it warrants a certain kind of performance, and he definitely knocks it out of the park, I would say. Yeah, it's worth calling out your comment too, Grail. I think that idea of Asbel like fully actualizing himself through his trauma, like we spent so much time earlier in the playthrough thinking about the ups and downs and pain of Asbel's particular family with this dad he didn't understand, who was trying to do things for his sons based on his own fraught relationship with his brother, their uncle, but in ways that really kind of tormented them, that they didn't understand and appreciate until years later when he was already dead and gone. And it did strike me, even just watching that final moment when Asbel just tenderly and desperately embraces Lambda, trying to resuscitate him and bring him into himself. Like, what a pure fatherly gesture, and something that's so tender and supportive, and that, Asbel probably got without realizing it in terms of his father Aston's intentions in his childhood, but which he has definitely learned to vocalize and express in a way that the previous generation was not really shared with him. I think that's really special. Yeah, I think the tenor of that voice acting is a big part of what makes the line so memorable, Grail. Absolutely. Well, friends, I thank you as always for being with us through the stream. As we mentioned, Dan's going to be hanging out with me through this coming week until we're off to Japan, so we'll have plenty more time to digest and think about this, and to think about it in the really rewarding context of a game that has this extended epilogue to the point of it becoming its own act. So it'll be really cool to think through the ending both on its own terms and also in terms of how the world and story is extended, especially in a world that, as we've talked about, is so concerned with understanding and supporting and celebrating the relationships and dynamics already within it, as opposed to so many JRPGs and indeed so many Tales games that are concerned with transforming the world in one way or another, whichever side of the protagonist-antagonist divide you're on. And to see it too as an enactment of exactly what Asbel promised, right? Like, as we've been given this way into thinking about our role in the game by identifying with Lambda as these sorts of players or entities that are being avatared, and Asbel promised to show Lambda the world. We can think about that too as we work through the F arc. You know, what is it? What is the nature of this world that Asbel is showing Lambda, and that we, by extension, as players, are also being shown? And that, to me, as much as anything, it's an instance of one of those moments we always talk about as loving so much, where the game is able to make really meaningful, like, thematic content out of some formal aspect of it, right? So we're able to have our own experiences and appreciation of the story as players, but then by virtue of what it says about that player-avatar relationship, those impressions of ours in the game can very directly become a part of the story that it's spinning and what it's trying to express to us. So a wonderful feedback loop, if you will, and I'm excited to keep going on it with you. There you go. Your favorite part is still coming up, Grail. I'm excited. And as you know, I'll remind the stream of this. I've actually never played through the F part. So
I was going to ask.
I know.
Yeah.
I think I played like maybe the very first few minutes of it, and then I got distracted by something else. So it will also be
that'll be
first
fun.
instance of,
Okay.
working through Tales content that I have never seen with
that.
you before.
Very good.
Which will be very special. Yes, always a pleasure, Chrissy. I'll give the shout outs and gratitude, especially as we've ended the main game, so to speak. Chrissy, Grail, thank you for staying all the way through. Such a pleasure. You know how much I love and value the post-game conversation distinctly amongst the various aspects of these live book clubs. So a pleasure having you here for that. Thank you. Pottery, sorry you had to bounce, but I know you well enough to know that you'll watch the VODs, and I'm sure you'll keep the conversation going. I'd be insulted if you didn't. Pick Moon Echo, I know sometimes you're lurking, my friend. Always a pleasure to see and feel your presence. Doug, I know you've been a mainstay through a lot of this stream. Haven't seen you this time around, but shout out to you too. Let us know which of your theories ended up being confirmed or not. And of course, an extension of love through the ether sphere to Matt McGill, who made that guest appearance on the last few streams. It was a pleasure having him, and especially in a game that is so distinctly concerned with networks of relationships, being able to breathe a broader network into being for the real-life JRPG party. That was a lot of fun. I know. Well, there'll be a million connections to plumb between the final moments here and other games too. So especially now that we've gotten sort of at least a basic framework for what it is that Graces seems to be concerned with in and of itself, you know what we're up to on Tales of Praxis well enough to know that we will unwind and extract a lot more meaning from that exactly by situating it more directly with moments from the other games. So we can look forward to plenty of those conversations as well. I know this game well enough to know that this will keep us going into the new year after the Japan trip, so be excited for that. And if you couldn't tell by me lighting up and sparkling in the last few moments of that great conclusion, I'm already spinning my wheels and getting excited and feeling that steam-powered engine that Pascal created in terms of what it is that I might write about. I'm really excited to dig into this, especially in conversation with what I'll be making him play next, Tales of Eternia, because I think it's concerned with some pretty similar things, but with a very different perspective and way of engaging with them, which is not surprising for all that we've talked about so far, but excited to see how that evolves too. All right, dear friends. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this great conclusion. You know, you say that hyperbolically, but don't put that evil on me, Grail, because I'm always looking to expand. We haven't done anything putting all the games in conversation with each other yet, and especially with stuff like title-based storytelling. Tales of Graces seems like a threateningly promising way to get into exactly that kind of thing. All right, dear friends. Well, of course, as always, if you have other thoughts, want to chat about things, always reach out on social media too. It's an extended conversation that reaches beyond any game or any particular moment in time and space. That's part of what makes these real-life book clubs so fun. But thank you again. Thank my dear friend and colleague, the tired but stalwart Dan Hughes, for being a wonderful contributor and inspiration, and my own kind of guiding light and paragon presence, like so many characters in these games. I was gonna say like Sophie because that feels the most apt, but I don't know how you feel about that comparison.
I was worried you were gonna say like Lambda.
Dan Sofaria Hughes. No, well that's what I thought about for other reasons. It seemed too dissonant in terms of his role in the narrative. Until next time, then, as always, we'll be back same time on Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And stay tuned for updates from Dan. I think you're good about updating your socials, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least a tentative plan to dive into Pokemon on his stream tomorrow, which should be a lot of fun. So if you're interested in a lot of the same perspective on intertextually celebrating and thinking about long-running series of games, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. And the shoe can be on the other foot in terms of Dan teaching me all about Pokemon as opposed to throwing Dan into the deep end of Tales. So look forward to that too. All right. Until then, my dear friends, I hope you think well. I hope you game well. I want to celebrate having another one under our belts, but we're not quite there. This is definitely still an occasion worth marking. So cheers to Tales of Graces. Cheers to Bandai Namco, the amazing creators of these games. And we'll see you next time. Until then, be good to yourself and take a lesson from Asbel's book, all right? Next time, friends.
Have a good one.
Cheers.